Davis.
Here.
Councilmember John Park.
Here.
Councilmember Rebecca Chase Williams.
Present.
Councilmember Bates Madison.
Here.
Councilmember Joe Gebbia.
Here.
All present.
Okay, I'll welcome one time now, and then I'll welcome her again tonight. But we'd like to welcome Rosemary Taylor as our new communications director, and she is. We're very excited to have her, and we'll do it again tonight. So have a speech ready. Okay. Upcoming agenda items: discussion of the framework of Parks and Recreation Commission. This is our first discussion as a council on this issue. So.
And I think we need to highlight that word discussion.
Right. We're discussing.
Okay, because there are different forms of recreation
Right.
systems.
Right. Is Laura or Emily going to do
Laura?
lead this?
Yes.
Now, Laura, what you had sent us as far as informational purposes was what a traditional Parks and Recreation Commission as established through a county or a city under the Georgia statute would be, correct?
That's correct.
Right, and so that's just one avenue you have to establish a Parks Recreation Committee.
That's correct. One avenue that the city would have.
Right, and that's more of a form that's a governing board, correct?
Correct.
With powers to.
Right, and there were various guidelines that had to be adhered to
Right.
in order to go that route and set up that type of structure.
Right, and so we can discuss whether that's the route we want to take or not, or go into a different route. So if you want to give us a brief overview of that route, and we'll,
Yes.
now we don't want to go that way, or yes, we do.
Well, I think it's important to just state what the two routes are.
Okay,
Authority.
Authority.
Which has decision-making powers.
Mhm.
And then a commission or an advisory board.
right,
Or if an
Which is
advisor.
recommending
Right.
only.
okay,
Correct. If you go the authority route, that is governed by the Georgia Code. And for example, there are various guidelines that must be adhered to. For example, the number of members that are on that authority has to be between a minimum of 5, maximum of 9. They must serve 5-year terms, and those terms must be staggered. The members are appointed by the mayor and approved by the city council. And there are various powers also that would be granted to this board. For example, it would have the power to employ, they call it play leaders or playground or community center directors, for example. Then, as we had discussed, the separate route is more of a recommending board that would make recommendations to the council.
but that's still under that
It's the city.
statute. If you create under that statute, you still are subject to some of the same guidelines, like the 5-year terms, even if you're doing a recommending board.
No.
You're not,
no.
okay. You're not subject to the 5-year terms and other, okay.
No,
all right,
this is for this, the statutory guidelines are if you create an authority.
okay. All right. What about creating a commission? What are the statutory guidelines there, if any?
The commission would fall within the same guidelines, the statutory guidelines.
Okay. And a board, which is not mentioned by statute, is that right?
What it actually, let's see, what it actually says is, the statute says a park board or other board that the governing body may determine.
Okay. That,
But it really doesn't go into, I mean, throughout, I've also seen a commission used in this as well. So I think that the main area of importance here is the types of powers that are granted to whatever you create this, whether it's more of a supervisory or if they actually have a lot of powers to implement policy.
okay. All right. So if you don't have a board or commission that implements policy or governs or has taxing authority, you're saying you do not have to follow the guidelines of the term amounts?
The term limits, yes,
You don't have,
correct.
you don't have to?
Correct.
Okay, all right.
So there's only one definition I heard you say that would have all these term limits and granted powers, and that's the authority.
Authority
Yes.
Correct. The rest are recommending bodies that
or commission.
assemble to,
Correct, and the recommending type bodies was not governed and was not covered under the Georgia Code section.
Okay, so that comes under the power of our charter, where it talks about boards and, right,
Correct.
gotcha.
Correct.
I'd be interested in hearing from Jerry about the kind of either boards, commissions, or authorities you've worked with over your long tenure in this business and what you have found useful, not useful.
Yes, ma'am. We had the Forsyth County Recreation Board was an advisory board. But they did set policy and they did have terms. They served 2 years. And they stagger them in just like the city council does. Every 2 years, 3 will go out or 2 will stay in, or you can reappoint them. A lot of guys stayed on the rec board for 16 years. Some stayed 4 years, some stayed 2 years. But it's according to what kind of business they were in and how much time they had to put into it.
Will they set policy too?
They had recommendations for policy. I mean,
Okay.
such as what's the policy of the game times of the softball leagues and things like that, rules and regulations.
Okay.
And so, I assume, was that useful to you? Did you?
Yes, ma'am.
You like
And then the
having a
board,
sounding
the
board?
Board of Commissioners listened to them. I mean, when they made recommendations, I don't know, maybe 80% of the time, the commission listened to them, and they adopted those rules and policies.
What our purpose, at least and I think we've all discussed this, for wanting to have a commission, a board, or some kind of group, a citizen group, to help the city with its parks future.
Right.
From my perspective, it is, we all have pretty much full-time jobs or other lives, and this is obviously a part-time occupation, but we spend a lot of time doing lots of things. And parks are one of the reasons the city was formed, and parks are very important to us as a council and to the citizens as a whole. In order for us to implement the vision that was set out in our comprehensive plans and the vision that people have for our parks, and the citizens have for our parks, we need to hear from our citizens on a regular basis, and having it in a panel or a board that is representative of the city as a whole, with their ears to the ground, listening to what people want, what they consider important, and telling us, I think, is a very efficient way for us to implement what the citizens actually want. Because our vision is, and I've said this before, our vision is the citizens' vision. It's not something that we want to do on our own and compartmentalize. So in your opinion, do you think it's a wise idea and it's something you would like to have as a citizens board to kind of bounce things off of back and forth and come up
I
with?
think it'd be a great sounding board for you guys. It'd be like, we'd meet monthly, and then what we find out from the citizens, we report to you guys.
Right.
So it's
Okay.
kind of a sounding board for you guys, and also, if you can get somebody on a recreation board that covers this whole city and looks out after the whole city.
Right.
So did you, the makeup of the boards, we obviously have a lot of constituencies, we're so blessed to have really great organizations, Friends of the Park, organized sports, nonprofit organizations, a robust tennis center, all kinds of things going on. I want to be careful that we include representatives of the whole family. That we have a lot of different people who love our parks, use our parks, or are raising children who want to use our parks, and for all ages. So do you have any advice in terms of, I want to be careful not to have, quote, special interest groups or somebody who just represents their league or their sport, but I do want to have, I do want to let the baseball, the football, the soccer, the tennis people all have a voice too, because they serve thousands of our citizens.
Right. Y'all will be electing the board. Appointing, I guess if you appointed 9 guys or 11 guys,
Now,
Citizens.
7 or 9 women and men.
right. You can, guys meaning women and men, right.
You must be a northerner.
And everything in between.
But you gotta have, and you'll have different interests on each one of them.
Yeah.
Right.
And you need that. That makes a good board. And then they come out and having an odd number, they'll vote. And sometimes they all won't agree, but they'll have a 7-2 vote or a 5-4 vote. And then we'll bring it to you guys and then you guys vote on it.
I
Ladies.
think one of the points Rebecca's trying to bring up is that we have this existing volunteer organization by Park out there
Right.
now. How do you see these two working in concert? The commission here
The
and
PARC committee's been working well, with the city and knowing what's in the parks and inventories. Now, and I think some of them are athletic, they know about sports and other things too. So some of them could be complex and do that, and maybe some of them aren't. I don't know. I haven't met with them that much. But they have, 12 members? How many members y'all have on Park? 12? So, you got that many there, so then you gotta, if you're gonna have 9, and then you want representatives from these other athletic organizations, which would only be fair.
Yeah, I think a lot of cross-pollination is what we're
Right.
looking at, and not just people who are with athletics or who are just with,
Right.
passive side. I think it's some people that look out for the general best interest of all the parks and can think, I don't hate to say this term globally, but think about the city as a whole and what, and really not distinguish between streets or neighborhoods lines or district lines or boundaries, but how we can have a top-notch park system, which we're on our way to having. We just got a lot of work to do.
Right.
And the more citizen help we can get, the better. And I don't see our Park and Recreation Board or Commission supplanting any of the volunteer work. I see them as a way to help facilitate more work to the
More
volunteers
input,
if they want, because there are
right.
plenty of people who want to do work that they're, a lot of them are in park, but there are more people who need another avenue, and I think that this can be a funnel for more folks to get involved, and that's our goal.
I think too, as we work on the more in-depth master plans or visioning of each park, we will hear input on each of those parks too, and I think the plans will help set the blueprint for going forward too. So I mean, I think all of the, both the combination of park continuing to be an important voice, the master plans, once they're in place, the Friends Group. Conservancies. And then I think our obligation is really to look out for, as you said, the city as a whole, all the parks, and thinking about all ages. We want parks that attract both, us older citizens.
Toddlers and teetotalers.
young moms,
Yeah.
and the millennials, and the loppers, and the kickball, and, everybody. I mean, we're so blessed to have,
I was wondering where that strange recommendation for someone to serve on the board came from. It was King Edward, and it was some LARPer.
There you go.
They had a LARPer.
King Edward. And I was like, where's this King Edward coming from?
I think the direction that you're headed in is you're looking for something along the same lines or parallel to our Planning Commission, which is a recommending body.
Right.
And, to be able to do that, we can come back with a framework for that, and we can come back in the first meeting in March. So that way we could take a look at other examples throughout the city and see how we engage these other entities as
Right.
well. And then what even a sample of what the bylaws would be for this advisory board, and we could call it that.
Well, one thing I would like to see in it is, I sort of help, as far as charter, sort of a clearinghouse for not all volunteers that want to do work at the parks need to come through the Parks Board, but I would like for them to be a gatherer of the volunteer arm of the city, in concert with, I guess, Mike Vesio would be.
Well, and that's happening right now.
Right.
He has the inventory of those
Right.
persons that have identified themselves as wanting to be a volunteer.
Right.
And it may not always just be for parks.
Right.
There are other opportunities that we're looking to engage citizens in, too.
I would want them also to take recommendations and advice from the head of the Parks Department. That's one thing. But at the same time, I would like for them to be able to come up with their own ideas and initiatives to present to the Parks Department and to present to council. So kind of a two-way street there.
I did think there was some pretty good language in, I think it was maybe the Alpharetta Code that you gave us that really delineated the difference between, the advisory board and staff.
Right.
Because we don't need a citizen board directing staff or
Right.
getting in the weeds of our professional staff. And I think those roles just need to be really clear and spelled out, and I would want to see those in the bylaws, I think.
Right, make sure that they take recommendations from staff and what their staff's, priorities are, and then also have the ability to make their own recommendations about what,
Right.
to the
Right.
council, so that we can set the
But be
policy.
very careful about not directing staff. or,
Absolutely, yeah.
Just because you have the cell phone of some of our people doesn't mean you can call them and order them to do something,
Right.
Yeah, I think that as you look at how this board is set up, one of the things that I would caution is that because there are so many diverse interests in all of our parks, that we have adequate representation for those diverse interests. And you know, it sometimes is difficult if you're, you know, you've got a little niche market of, you know, tree climbers, and you don't get representation on your local Friends Board, and then because you don't have any representation there, you're not getting on the Parks Board. And then by the time it gets up to this commission, that voice is not heard, and I don't want to exclude these groups, and so I'm not exactly sure how to avoid that.
Well, you have a
But-
meeting
Well, I
just
think-
like this, and then you have people come to the podium just like we do in our
Right.
meetings.
Right.
And they have a public comment, and when somebody who climbs trees, who's not on the board, can come up and say,
Yeah.
hey, this is something, there's 10 of us here, and this
Right.
is something we're,
Well, one of the beauties that we'll be able to gain out of these individual master plans for each of our parks is to identify who the users are.
right.
Not only currently, but what potential users may be there
Mm-hmm.
if there's certain enhancements made to different venues in the park. And I think once that's identified, when there's activity or discussion regarding by the advisory board with the staff on certain parks, I think it's, you know, the department's responsibility to send notice out to those groups that do frequently use XYZ Park, so that they can be at least notified. It's just similar to what we do when we have a zoning case. We
Yeah.
notify the surrounding property owners. So if something's occurring in the park and when we understand who the users are, there should be a blanket email that goes out saying, here's the agenda, this is what we're talking about, and they're interested, you know, they'll come, and if they're satisfied, maybe, you know, they won't, or at least
let me-
they could communicate with staff.
Let me
at
toss
a
this
minimum.
out there, because philosophically, I'm a states' rights kind of guy. And if you think about this from an overarching, you know, form of government, we're essentially intending to set the power within one group that then cedes that power down to these individual parks. I actually like the reverse strategy, where you've got parks where those individual parks know their interests better than any group above, and even the city a lot of times. So I just want to make sure that we retain a lot of control and direction in those local parks groups, those friends groups for
Right.
each of the individual ones, and I don't want to see their message get diluted.
But we've got to be careful with that too, because, you know, I'm kind of agree with you, but this is sort of a federal, anti-federal argument you're talking about here. I mean, really, it's Brookhaven Parks and Rec, and I want to be careful that we don't get siloed into, you know, well, this is what, I think that there should always be a lot of consideration and a lot of consideration given to those local groups and what they see as needs. But as a whole, I think the purpose of the commission, to me, would be to balance those interests, say, yes, the people that live around this park and use it the most, they want these things here. But at the same time, we want this park to be used by everybody in the city, and we need some of these things to help promote that. So I think there's a balance there that needs to be struck, and that's kind of the instruction that when I make the appointments and y'all confirm, we need to talk to everybody about.
Yeah.
Is that that's what we expect.
I think the argument's really based upon a macro-micro view of this. We've got the individual units out there doing a micro for their individual parks. We're looking for an organization here to take a macro perspective on this. And we tend to talk about what's going on now, but I see coming down the road in the future, we're going to have more parks that need to be brought under the umbrella, and they need to be fed in, because on a micro level, there won't be really the kind of representation that exists today, and how we grow it as the city. So I do agree with that. I'd like to have the conversation, though, between all of us. Maybe more focus on what we're really expecting out of this authority or commission from a responsibility standpoint. I heard Jerry say, okay, well, we've had the Forsyth County example, and they set schedules. What else? Let's have the conversation on what we expect out of this commission.
I don't know the setting schedules. I think on the,
Well, that was Jerry's example.
I know, but
That's the only thing I heard.
the way I would look at it is, if we're hearing that maybe a certain league or certain user seems to be dominating a gym or a field or a park, that we would hear from the commission or the board that, hey, we need to maybe give some free time for these parks or these areas. Those kind of recommendations. I mean, because Jerry's doing his job and he's rolling along and doing what he knows how to do. And not everything he does necessarily is going to be loved by everybody in the city. And we all know that. And I think the board would be a good way to say, hey, we like this, but we need to maybe dial this back or adjust this here because this is something that we think not enough citizens are getting time at this place or this or that.
Okay, so basically, if a certain group of citizens are complaining that a park is being monopolized,
commission,
they
they
would
come
be
to
an
us.
ombudsman in it.
Yeah,
Okay, that's one. What else?
But I think Jerry could, and Jerry, you tell me if this is right or wrong, I would think this would be an important sounding board for you. So as you get ready to program our rec centers, you might go to them and say, we've had a lot of requests for bridge. Should we do that? Should we have more Zumba classes? Should we have the insanity classes? Should we, and just because one or two people want it doesn't necessarily mean it's a great idea. Gymboree has come in and wants to do blah, blah, blah. What do you all think about this? I assume those are the kind of decisions you're having to make all the time. And if I were you, I would want to, have some feedback or have some community input about what's going on. And I appreciate that. If in fact you're finding that, because this has happened when at times the Go Kickball people were speeding through neighborhoods and not being very respectful to the citizens who lived right there and jumping over the fences. Well, you're going to get some feedback from the people who were there, in the parks all the time. I think it's a way you could bring ideas to Jerry. I mean, maybe J. Max's mother-in-law wants to take her hyacinth group and have
The Dahlia Society and the Hydrangea Society.
The hydrangeas. We should welcome that. We should embrace that. And I
Have
think
3 police officers present for both of those anytime they meet. There's a gambling ring going on in the Hydrangea Society and the
Well, why don't we, when we come back on March the 10th, the first meeting, have an inventory of just a scope of what other advisory boards do? Jerry can have input to that.
We not
can
have it for the
reach
next meeting?
I'd like us to have a little bit more time so that if we're going to develop bylaws as an example and the framework, to be able to do that and come back.
I would think that this would be could be a possible valuable asset to us when it comes to how we need to allocate our assets. Because as we go down the road here, and there's going to be more and more demands at parks, different parks, evolving parks, buying pieces of land, looking at where there may be the opportunity to do that. This could be a very important advisory board to us, taking the macro view. I mean, we're talking about Zumba classes and all that, tree climbing, whatever. I think this could be the real value of this association. So I would be very interested in seeing what the other cities are doing as far as that list of responsibilities for associations like this. And I'm in agreement that we should not follow the structured 5-year with authority. It should be advisory.
I'd like a draft, though, Marie. I would like a draft by the next meeting so we can consider it, and then if we want to adopt it on the 10th, we could. But I would like to see, I'd like to get this moving.
You want just a draft of a resolution creating this advisory board?
With bylaws. See what the
Okay.
bylaws will offer, because
Is that doable?
Well, I think, what I've heard you all talk about, you've talked about a global approach. You've talked about a level of specificity, whether it's tree climbing or Zumba. I mean, you've crossed the spectrum. What I haven't heard you say is the encouragement of the board members themselves to advise about additional venues. I mean, if they're using the venues, there's a difference between an operator and a manager to a user. And I think one of the greatest values your advisory board would have would be to say, I was at the Murphy Candler Pool and the place was slammed. And is there any thought about, a fourth pool? Where could that be, Mr. Kinsey? And you pull out these master plans, and that's why we need these individual master plans to talk about what the current opportunities are, but what are the future uses? And there was a survey that was conducted with the Parks and Recreation Master Plan. I guess my point in saying all of this, I've heard you go from here to here, and I don't want you to miss here.
Right.
And I'd like to take time to properly draft it and to talk with the lawyers about what we do to set the governing responsibilities of that. But I'd like to hear from each of you, too, on what you envision, and certainly the guy that's going to be the liaison to the board. I mean, what specifically are they going to be acting on? I mean, surely you don't want them to decide who the instructor for Zumba is. That's his job.
No.
But if there are needs for other dance and cultural activities or photography class or whatever, that's the discussion that goes on between the Parks Director and his board, and they're going to be asking him, well, where could we have that? And he's either going to say, well, we could do it at this park or this park, or he may say, there's no room at the inn. Then the next line of conversation is going to be, well, what do we need to do? How do we advocate for that? How do we budget for that? What does that cost? So it's more than, this board's function is more than just hearing reports. It's
Right.
being engaged, and I don't want to.
Yeah, that's what I was saying about a
Yeah.
two-way street where they, do have their own ideas and present to Jerry and to us and evaluate Jerry's proposal and his needs and let them know what they think about it to us as well. So
I would be very interested in having them assist us and because we don't have time as council to do things like go investigate other parks and find out what they're doing.
No, that's right, you don't. That's
So
their
this would
job.
be a representative for us outside. They would take the initiative and bring back suggestive ideas. I'd be very interested in that.
And I would hope it's also a two-way street, so that if we say, we have an opportunity to acquire this land, or FEMA just turned over some other properties to us, what do you all think we should use it for? Or, we think there's a need for more soccer fields or something, and having that, being able to have that discussion as well.
Well, that, and then taking a step further and backing it up with surveys to really engage the
Right.
people that aren't coming to the meetings.
Right.
How do you reach out to them and get that information? So,
Okay.
One other thing is, when we set up these types of commissions, we as council are asked to nominate. So I would like to suggest that maybe we put in the newsletter, anybody interested in being considered for this, submit with a statement on why they think they would be good. So we'd have, because I'm not sure I know everybody who has an interest in this, especially in the 4th District, where we may be having a parks.
There's lots of interest.
I know there's
Believe
interest,
me,
but I
we're
want
not
them.
lacking for names, I'm telling you. There's
Right.
plenty of volunteers.
Well, for those that want to put the time in, that's
Yeah.
also important. Let
have
those that are interested
Demonstrated, time.
have the opportunity to
Right.
submit their name.
Right.
And we could do it publicly here at an announcement at council, but if we did it on the website or on the newsletter going out next time, if you're going to
on
extend
e-blast.
the e-blast, that'd be great. Maybe any and all of the above.
So that I'm clear, are you looking for a rough draft, or do you want a more enhanced draft?
I think a framework is
Yeah.
what would be very helpful. Rather than going to the specific
Yeah.
bylaws, I think,
Okay, good.
let's
Well,
get
we
the
can do
framework.
that.
Rough
then.
draft is exactly,
Okay.
that way we can fill in the blanks or say, this is the direction, then you bring and we have the option to adjust the bylaws at any time, I would think.
Well, yeah, absolutely. Well, okay, so we'll bring the framework back. If you all are comfortable or whatever needs to be tweaked, we can do that. Then for March the 10th, we'll bring the final draft along with the bylaws. And
I think we're all in agreement that we do not want the statutory commission authority type.
That's my understanding.
All right, so, and we expect it to be an advisory group of citizens who work in concert with Jerry or whoever the Parks Director is, and to evaluate and advise us on his proposals and his direction.
Right.
And then their own proposals as well to bring to us for whether we accept the recommendations or not.
Right.
I think that so folks have been talking to you about this. I've kind of promised them that it would be a quarterly meeting type group, and Jerry mentioned monthly before. I think initially, there might be some needs to do it monthly for a period of time, and then to go quarterly, or meet as decided by the board.
just what we do with the
Yeah,
Development
right,
Authority.
Right, same
I
thing.
think minimally, we would have to be setting objectives of what we'd expect out of them.
Right.
So they'd have a start from there.
Okay.
We don't have interaction, do we, at work session with
No.
comments?
Well, we can have it at the regular meeting.
Okay.
We don't
No.
do public comment.
No.
Right. We should, I would like to
Tom,
do
is
it.
where's Tom is here?
He's
Is that-
on his way.
He's here.
He's right.
Oh, is he?
Is that possible for us at work sessions to set up where we can have interaction, conversation with the public?
public? I would advise against it. I mean, you can do it, but I would advise against it. Unless there's some report or something that somebody's going to provide for you. But just to say, somebody out in the audience, what do you think? No, I wouldn't go there.
Could you please put on a surgical mask? You sound really,
I can-
really rough. I mean,
Have you
not
had
only-
your
I just-
MMR vaccination?
I feel like I'm getting sick right now just listening to you.
I can't hear a word you're telling me.
Thanks,
Hope
Tom.
you get back. Tom, if you need to get home, buddy, you sound pretty bad. Okay, all right.
Okay.
A speechless
Seriously,
lawyer.
I feel bad for you. Yeah. All right, okay. Next is what? What are we?
Item is other agenda items, special land use permit slips. Ben has that.
Well, if you recall, it's been a while since we brought up the discussion again regarding the special land use permit associated with late night establishments and nightclubs, and Councilwoman Williams brought this up before our attention. Actually, I will defer to Emily, because she's the one who came up with the wonderful memo that she'll be sharing with you, and that's already been shared in the agenda packet.
Ben asked me to do some research, and so we went back and looked. And the SLEPs for late-night establishments were actually created by DeKalb County in 2008. And they did it because they were having problems with noise and traffic, and bars basically opening up near residents. And so that's how we have our current ordinance as it is. And it separates between late-night establishments, which is a restaurant or other establishment that serves alcohol after 12:30, and then you've also got nightclubs, and nightclubs are with music and dancing. So you've got two different things, and in the 8 zoning districts that they're allowed, OI, OD, OCR, C1, C2, M, PC2, and PC3, that's when you have to get the SLEPs, but only when it is for a late-night establishment, only when it's 1,500 feet of a residential area. And so what I did is I went and kind of did a brief survey going through some of our surrounding cities to see how they're handling noise, how they're handling bars. And Atlanta probably has the most regulations about it. Atlanta specifically has zoning designations for bars, nightclubs, and lounges. And they have a little definition about, it's about people. That's how they make the defining. And they just flat out say bars are allowed in commercial areas, pretty much all of their zoning regulations. But they do exclude nightclubs from certain commercial. We're not talking about residential at all, commercial. Another thing, though, that Atlanta does is in their alcohol license, and this happens in several jurisdictions, that you flat out can't have an alcohol permit for on-premise consumption of alcohol if you're 300 feet of a residence. And we've got that in Brookhaven for schools, for the things that are tracked in the state statute. But we don't have anything about residences. So we use the SLEPs instead of saying if you're 300 feet, you can't have an alcohol license.
That's a
Yes,
way to
sir.
deal with each issue on a per-case basis.
Right. The SLEPs, you come in and you get your special land use permit, and then you're done.
What does Atlanta do for a mixed-use project? So like if you're in Atlantic Station, there's certainly late-night clubs there right below residential.
They actually exclude mixed use from that distance requirement. And they also exclude certain areas. They've got actual legal descriptions in their
entertainment
ordinance.
districts. Yeah, Underground is one of
Yes,
them, right?
and I think some of them may have just been pre-existing, probably locations that they excluded from that 300 feet requirement. And then they also exclude mixed use across a board, mixed use.
What about neighborhoods adjacent to mixed use?
They exclude mixed use from this 300 feet requirement. So if you're part of like Town Brookhaven, you would be excluded from that 300 feet.
What if you're Haven and Valenza and you don't have residences above your building, but behind you have residences, townhomes?
Is Haven
Not-
mixed, is that it?
Which
Yeah.
are not part of they're not part of the development, but they're homes within less than 300 feet of the.
I think what they're referring to, and again, not knowing exactly what their definition of mixed use may be, but in most cases, what they're referring to in mixed use would require or include a residential component to the overall development.
Right, so that wouldn't qualify.
That would not, for
But it
instance,
would be
Haven would
prohibited.
not.
But it would be prohibited under Atlanta's ordinance. Because they serve alcohol for consumption.
Within 300 feet of
Within-
residential, yes,
so that
that's
would-
their,
So that strip would not be allowed under Atlanta's ordinance.
correct.
Atlanta's is pretty strict. Chamblee is 100 yards from a residential
Same,
parcel.
300 feet, same thing.
Well, my math isn't the best tonight, is it? Decatur's 0, Dunwoody is 0, Sandy Springs is 0. They don't regulate it at all. Smyrna has 75 feet, so they're a lot on the other end.
I think of doing it on a case-by-case is probably, unless you think, Rebecca or anybody, that that's an issue. I mean,
I think the planning department, and Ben, you can correct me, that the SLEPs aren't necessarily a bad thing because it does create an additional level for somebody to come in, but it also gives you the opportunity to put a condition on that you wouldn't have been allowed to do otherwise. So you can say, add more soundproofing, do this to a business, which you couldn't do before. I know there's some
Wasn't your
concern
issue
around
that
that.
the
Here
time-
was my issue at the time,
Yeah.
is that we were unevenly requiring
Right.
SLUPs.
Right.
And so we made Mr. Ethiopian Restaurant jump through all kinds of hoops to get it, when in fact his competitor across the way was never required and stayed even later and louder than he did. We have restaurants all over town, bars, that continue to serve alcohol after 12:30, which is the cutoff. But they were, and, beloved places like the Bat and Ball and, what's the one at the
Pub
tree?
71 and.
Pub 70, well, that are really right next to the Righteous Room and places like that are very, very close to residential. And they weren't required to go through SLUPs. So I was just asking that, let's be clear about what our definition, because what I think we found happened is that somebody would come in, apply for a license, and say, I'm a restaurant. And we didn't either have the right paperwork or ask the right questions to say, well, do you quit serving at 12:30? Because if you don't, then it throws you into a different category.
Right.
And so we either need to redo that process and just be fair to everybody. I mean, I think we need to keep an eye on restaurants and nightclubs that are near residences. So I'm not opposed to that. If we can do it by just simply enforcing noise and, like, I guess what all these other places do, that's okay too. I don't like all this additional bureaucracy. The SLUP process is making somebody going through a pretty substantial zoning process, right? You gotta-
But I think what your issue that you pointed out, because you had experienced it in your work with DeKalb County before, and what our issue was the difference between a late night establishment and a restaurant. So I think if we attack that, then it's going to treat everybody the same. If you have an alcohol license, I don't think the distinction between restaurant and bar should be made. I think we should take what they're going to proposing to do and look at it in relation to where the residences are or where other sensitive areas might be. But I think the distinction between the restaurant and the late night establishment was the problem that caused the one guy to have to go through the hoops and the other guy not to, because he was classified as a restaurant or a late night establishment or vice versa. They're two distinct things that allow you to do two different.
I mean, there's further detail in terms of, I forgot the gentleman's name, but the Ethiopian restaurant, he had gone through that same experience with DeKalb, so he was familiar with the process, and he approached us directly,
Right.
stating that he was proposing this type of business that would consist of music and, late night related uses. So do I need to seek a SLUP? And we told him yes, because that's the requirements, and he experienced it, and he was fine with that process. Ever since our last discussion over the SLUP process, we did incorporate added features to the business license application, where they would state if they're a restaurant, do they serve alcohol? If it's a yes, then they would have to identify the hours of operation. And from that point on, then we could distinguish between a restaurant or a restaurant that may also be considered as late night establishment. And that way, we come to a sort of a fair treatment based upon the information that they
But what's the
provide for us.
difference? I mean, why do we need to make a distinction? Because so many restaurants, like Kaleidoscope and Pub 71, that are restaurants and that stay open later, but they're a restaurant as well.
Sure.
Why don't we just have everybody have the same regulations when
Well-
it comes to serving of alcohol?
So that's the thing. At this
Whether they
point,
closed early by choice or they closed in accordance with what our law is on closing times.
sure. What I'll get at is this: in terms of the SLUP requirement for late night establishment nightclubs, that came into play in 2008, I believe. So any business that was in business prior to 2008, they were able to proceed and be grandfathered under DeKalb County. So that could have been the case for a lot of these businesses that are existing and operating as is at this point.
I have a list, and I think this list is a little old, but there was 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 new.
Right.
The
So-
rest were all grandfathered.
Even a lot of the existing business within town Brookhaven were existing prior to the requirement being put in place, I believe. Well, let me take that back. But I believe it was rezoned in 2006 in terms of development. I don't necessarily know what DeKalb may had sort of issued in terms of a grandfathering clause or not for the development.
Is OCR, and as I read the DeKalb ordinance, they require
Oh, yes.
a SLUP if you're an OCR. So
Yes.
did the Blind Dog and Smash and everybody go get SLUPs? No.
I don't, yeah, and again, that was,
Okay.
those folks were actually, they got their business license from DeKalb.
Yeah, Ben and Emily.
But, yeah.
The intent of what we were trying to do here is to create an even playing field
Yeah.
for the participants. And I think J-Max and Rebecca are bringing up good points here. If you've got a restaurant that closes at 12:30, and then we have a late-night establishment, if we put everybody under the same ordinance, if they want to close early, that's fine.
You want
And
to
then,
distinguish.
and then this whole point about what Emily was saying about DeKalb County or Atlanta premising what they're doing based upon like noise ordinance. Well, we have a pretty good noise ordinance now, and we've addressed issues even with the ones that were grandfathered in, so we know it works. So, we have the ways of addressing the negative issues that could come from it. That doesn't preclude us from having those addressed at the point of getting the license.
Correct.
So we're just looking for a way, and I hope we have a recommendation coming from you of how to potentially simplify this and create an even playing field.
If you're looking for an even playing field without distinguishing between, again, the hours of operation and just looking at in terms of the face value of their actual primary use of the business itself, if it's a restaurant. And if we want to give them obviously the flexibility to create their own hours of operation and not make that distinction, then actually what we could do is sort of similar to what other jurisdictions have done, is fall back on the existing ordinances that we have in place. Like Councilman Gavier, you just mentioned, we have a noise ordinance, we have an alcohol ordinance. We could allow for those ordinances to dictate what the requirements are in terms of alcohol and noise.
How do we deal with the sensitivity, if because not every place is the same. If we want to, like, I can think of an example right now, Linwood Park, right on Osborne and Windsor Parkway, there's some parcels there that people in those areas want to have as either a little pub, restaurant, coffee shop, all kinds of little things right around, there's already a restaurant there. So while we want to be able to, in my mind, without making them distinguish between a late night and a restaurant, know what they're going to do, what their hours are going to be, and be able to grant a SLUP or some other kind of permit based on the individual circumstances of where they're going in. Not like City of Atlanta does, but more like DeKalb does it with the SLUP, but without the uneven playing field of a late night establishment / restaurant.
You could make any restaurant or any place that was going to have alcohol within a certain location come in and get a SLUP, but that would be everybody.
I think to your point, Mayor, we may have to look into possibly then redefining what a late night establishment is.
Right.
I think that's the best way to do it, without putting sort of a distance requirement. Because like you said, in that particular area that you're referring to, let's take, for instance, Avelinos.
Right.
If we're just basing it on zoning, it's going to be difficult, because you
Right.
have to do it across the board.
Right.
But if we were to distinguish what type of business, let's say we're more specific as to a late night establishment would be considered or those businesses that are considered as lounges.
Right.
Or a bar specifically, then yes, maybe we make them go through the SLUP process. Maybe that's what we may have to look into, and not require across the board any business that exceeds the hour of 12:30 and serves alcohol going through that process.
I just want the ability to allow businesses not to have to go through a bunch of hoops that might be unfair,
Sure.
but at the same time retain the ability to know what neighbors want, let them come and say, hey, we're fine with this, we're not fine with that, it's within 50 feet of my house, and no.
Okay.
I want the ability for people to.
The whole purpose of this is to make sure that neighborhoods are undisturbed.
Right.
If an establishment wants to stay open past a certain hour, whether it be 11 o'clock, 12:30, or 3:30, whatever.
Right.
So as long as we have protection in that arena, it should be a fairly simple issue, whether it's an Avelinos or whether it's a Peach Ballroom.
Sure.
It really doesn't make any difference.
I'm all in favor of doing away with the SLUP completely, and now that you've showed us this chart, nobody else has the SLUP, but they're enforcing these same kind of restrictions that I think we want for the peace and tranquility of our neighborhoods.
Another option that you could do is you could adopt the 300 feet in your alcohol license and then have people, if they are in Linwood Park, they could come in and get a special exception.
Would they have to come before council to do that, or?
Well, we could,
how-
probably the
The
alcohol
alcohol
board
board,
reviews,
yeah.
or we could direct it to council,
Well,
but
this,
that
you
would
know,
be,
would we have wanted Avelinos to have to do that when they are 75 feet from a house?
they would have to, unless,
I don't know.
No,
I think it's-
yeah, I think I get a better idea of what the council's wishes are. I think we just need to, again, distinguish certain types of uses
Right.
that may be associated with loud noise
Right.
or problematic
Rambunctious
issues,
behavior,
right?
yeah, right.
That may be associated or tied generally with a certain use. We may have to look into that and say, again, reclassify and redefine what late-night establishments are. One thing that I would suggest is, for nightclubs in particular, I think it's worthwhile keeping nightclubs as a SLUP. But for late-night establishments,
Yeah.
redefining
nightclubs.
it.
You're right. Yeah, nightclubs for certain. If that's what their purpose is, I think that's more likely to have issues than anything else, is a strict nightclub.
But
Okay.
I'm pleased to hear what you said, Ben, that you've already added language and are asking better questions at the front
Right.
desk there in terms of when people apply for licenses, so that we catch that early on.
Right.
Because that's where the unfairness happened. People slid by without really us realizing that they didn't quit, they didn't close at 12:30. And they do have live music and yet they weren't asked to go through a SLUP.
Ben, how does this
process.
work? I'm sorry, Rebecca. How is this working out in Dunwoody where they have zero regulations?
Well,
We haven't discussed that, and that seems to be the direction this conversation's going.
But they have a couple places like in the Dunwoody Plaza.
I mean,
Oak
we,
Room or the,
I think we got to look at the
Dunwoody
difference in
Town.
terms of the development that has occurred within Dunwoody
It's
compared to
different. Their
Brookhaven.
setup is different.
In Dunwoody, you have a large commercial core where it's surrounded by mostly, there is a step down in terms of zoning where you will have commercial, then you have more higher intensive residential uses leading into eventually into the sort of the more single-family detached. Where Brookhaven, it's very unique in that you have, Super Jenny's. You have this commercial that fronts on Peachtree that backs directly up against residential. So I think it's a difference in terms of development. From my own personal experience, a lot of the places that I've visited within Dunwoody, it's not, there's enough separation, distance
We're a little
from
more
your
similar to
typical
Decatur.
residential. Sorry?
We're a little more similar to Decatur. They have
Correct.
they have a little commercial core, but they also have, Taqueria del Sol is right next to a house.
Right.
And there's
The
other
development is
restaurants.
very unique, and Brookhaven's unique. I don't necessarily know if we could make a clear distinction or comparison between us and Dunwoody in terms of what issues they run into, but obviously it's an issue as apparent here. Again, Righteous Room, they back up directly into, an apartment complex that's occupied mostly by senior residents. My grandmother, my wife's grandmother lives there, so I'm very aware of that area. So with that said, I think this is one way that we could go about alleviating that issue. Again, redefining what late-night establishments are and being able to bring that before the council to see if you agree with the definition. And I would request if we could bring this before the council on the March
10th?
March 10th.
Yes, thank you.
Council meeting.
I'll give you a little funny anecdote just for everybody's entertainment. My dear mother, who, of course, who passed, her neighbors for many years, who I grew up with, moved away recently, and they rent an apartment now. They sold their house, they rent an apartment, looking over, and the lady got the unit she wanted that's 4th floor facing Bat and Ball and Righteous Room. So she gets out on her porch, and she sits all night long and watches the soap opera play out before. So she enjoys the late night annex that goes. Every night you can see her up there just watching all
Really
night
is an
long.
entertainment value, I
Yes,
guess.
yes, she loves it. She loves it. So
Better
some
than the
people-
grocery store.
Yeah, yes.
And I thank you for the direction. I think that's what we needed, just to sort of fill it out a little bit
Yes.
more. But we'll bring a definition before council for you to review.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Good job on that, Ben. Appreciate that. Parks update?
Yes.
You're
First
going to
of-
fill in for Tom, I hope. I've already sneezed. I've already gotten what he's got. I know it. There's some liability there, I think.
We'll keep him back there. Regarding Blackburn 2 Park, which I brought up at this last meeting, we've been in contact with the Housing Authority's attorney, and again, the Housing Authority owns 2 smaller portions, which make up Blackburn 2 Park. One of the 3 total parcels has already come over to the city. And per our last discussion with the Housing Authority's attorney, we had a couple of comments to the draft deed that they had sent over for review, and they were incorporating those changes. We followed up with them. We have not yet received the draft deed, revised draft deed, but we are working.
But they had no objection to your
towards that.
comments?
Not
Okay.
that I've heard.
Okay, all right, so we're just waiting on them to send it back to us. All right, we'll get another update on that next meeting. What's
Yes.
what's the other one?
Then regarding Brookhaven Park, Osborne Park, and Fernwood Parks, as we had mentioned, we had a meeting with the county regarding those parks. Again, it's been they needed a little bit of time to go back and discuss that, and we have followed up with the county attorney regarding that. Unfortunately, at this time, I do not have an update from the county to provide, but we are continuing to press them and to work with them.
All right,
We
so-
put a deadline on how long we give them to get a response on this issue? 30 days, and when was that? Sure. So are we halfway through that 30 days, or roughly? A little more than halfway?
I would think so. I can check.
And the next step is what, the filing of a lawsuit over it, or? It's, the line's drawn in the sand?
Well,
or-
I think you're talking about two, I mean, you might be talking about Brookhaven Park.
Well, yeah, Brookhaven Park.
But
I
the
think is
Linwood 2 Park, I mean, we've found the drums, right, and we're comfortable with accepting them, that park.
Well-
They all are.
What did the phase one say?
The Phase 1 on Linwood Park recommended additional testing
Okay.
based on the drums that were found there and located there.
How long ago was that?
Who was saying that, Emily?
We'll say-
Environmental.
in
The
last
Who
the
is-
Phase
months.
1,
Who is saying that?
ETRI, which was the Phase 1, the environmental engineer that
Environmental
performed the
study.
Phase
Yeah,
1.
And how long ago was
If you
that?
want to go out and kick the cans and say it's okay, and are willing to accept the
I
park.
think we've had some citizens do that.
Yeah, I understand.
I mean, but if they suggested additional testing, did we not get additional testing? Or we're not allowed to, or?
Well, no, we've asked the county for the opportunity to do so, and they
Let's
would
just
not
not ask
permit
the
us to
county
do
to-
so unless we agreed to assume the liability of any cleanup.
Right.
And so if, that's,
I mean, if we accept it as is, then that's a default that we would have
well,
liability
then
for
it would
cleanup
be
anyway,
it
right?
would be ours.
Right, so I
But
mean,
state law also says that where you're accepting property and you're required to have an environmental, and they recommend that you do additional testing, then you've got a requirement to do it. So if you're, adequately, feel comfortable based upon a citizen's going out and looking and kicking the cans,
no.
and you want to take it, then we'll tell them, we'll assume the obligation if something's wrong.
My point is that if we've had citizens go out there kicking the cans, why can't we have a citizen go out there or a company go out there and test I mean,
Because
what, are they going to arrest us?
trespass, okay? We have to ask permission to do it.
Again, these are one of these headlines I'd love to be involved with. Mayor arrested for trespassing on park
So,
property.
so Tom, we can either wait this out and then sue them,
Right.
or we can kick the can and be sued. We're in a lawsuit either way. Is that
Well,
not correct?
Unless they act properly.
Well, I mean, if you want to
Well,
know
obviously they're not.
if you want to know my observation is that I would think that you're not going to find anything there
I do.
anyway,
I agree with you.
based upon what's there. And but you still need to have somebody go out there and confirm that.
Mhm.
And if you're willing to say to the county, if we find it and it's something that requires cleanup, we'll do it, but we want the park, then I don't see any monumental risk in that, other than making sure you comply with state law about going out and doing more than just kick the can.
Right. I think we should go out and test it.
I'm in favor of that, I gotta say.
But let's just go out and test it.
Well, we'll move forward with the Phase 2.
Thank you.
Okay,
All
and
right.
so we'll just,
Otherwise, this thing is just gonna go on, and
Yeah.
we're gonna get ourselves in a corner with another expense for legal, and if we're gonna take over the park anyway, we're gonna assume liability.
Well, I just say we go forward with phase 2. All right.
And with the subsequent transfer of the property. I mean, I think we could go ahead and say to them that we're willing to accept the property with the.
Why don't we do the phase 2 first?
We'll do it.
With the.
and And what I would suggest is you have us hire the engineer to do it.
Sure.
Okay?
Yes,
All
totally.
right, so we have some
Thank you.
attorney-client privilege associated with that.
Okay, thank you. All right.
Because I don't expect that you're going to find
Right,
anything there.
right.
I mean, it's,
All right,
Other thing now, the Brookhaven Park.
well, first, the easier one, I think, Fernwood Park. I thought that it was the county's position that that was not a park but stormwater. And I see that there's a next agenda item to talk about the stormwater transfer of properties. Have they not, so if they're saying it's a stormwater, but then it's not in this list of the stormwater transfer, it seems to be in a no man's land in DeKalb County's books. Can we, I mean, to me.
well, I think it gets down to them. It's not, first of all, you have accepted the stormwater management.
Right.
The other part is they may not look at that as $100 an acre property.
Yeah.
And that's where I think the rub is.
Oh, so you think that.
I don't see
they-
why the county wouldn't want you to take that over and maintain it for
Right, it's a cost
for
burden
any
for them.
reason whatsoever. I mean, and frankly, I think it's a park. It's beautiful.
It is.
So what have they said about that one?
They say it's for their stormwater management.
Well, we are stormwater. We have the utility
Right.
here.
So the bottom
I know.
line is, we don't pay for that.
We would pay
Right.
for it.
It's being conveyed, transferred to us.
Transfer
Right.
to us.
It's not designated as a park by them.
We don't have to pay for it.
So we won't be paying for that.
Well, have they, but they've not
We should
included it,
not
you're
have to
saying?
pay for that.
We have not, they have not dedicated any of their assets regarding stormwater management to the city.
Why not?
But they have
Well, I
some.
think, well, why not, is they're probably asking themselves the same question, based upon the condition that it's in.
Okay. Not to totally disagree, but I'd like to just add a little
I
bit.
can't hear a word you're saying.
Okay, good. All right, well then,
You
let me
can call
move
me
quickly.
whatever you would like.
No, I'm not calling you anything, I'm just adding to the information. Okay, the conveyance of the stormwater structures came over when we accepted the right-of-way.
Okay.
All of the infrastructure, because they were valued.
Right.
They were part of the assets of the city when we did our
Right.
audit.
Right.
Okay, so the hardcore part of what people understand as being stormwater utility-related, catch basins, head walls,
Right.
detention ponds, only a couple of them, because since 1970, the county stood down and said, we're not accepting any more detention ponds.
Okay.
So they are the responsibility of
Whomever-
whoever has the
yeah.
pond in their backyard, or if it's the
This
HOA.
this doesn't apply to Fernwood.
Correct.
Okay.
All right. But those properties that are on the next item that were purchased through FEMA for flood management are not parks. And Tom is correct in his observation. I don't see why they would want them. They don't, because they're mowing them and keeping them clean. They
Right.
want to transfer them, and we are in the process of doing that right now. The attorney's office has engaged an attorney that's doing a title search on over 30 parcels. And once we conduct that, I've already informed the county that we will prepare the quitclaim deeds, because I don't want to wait for them. And once we can have clear title, they will prepare, the city attorneys will prepare the quitclaims, and then we will get the county to sign off and convey that to us, and we will receive it.
All right, so back to the original question. What about Fernwood stormwater utility property?
Well, it sounds like that's going to be in that.
Right.
I thought you said it wasn't in the list.
Well, the
Even
list
their own
that she's
ma-
going
they
to
even- They
prepare.
are, even on their own maps, they show half of Fernwood as a park.
Okay.
Right.
And
So we'll get
if
that
you
cleared
go out
up.
there, you see park equipment.
Right.
Good.
So
Right.
it's just one of those things, Mayor,
Yeah.
we'll just have to push them on.
Right.
Yeah.
And that'll be through their public works, stormwater utility people.
We'll get some kind of letter in between, or a meeting between now and the next meeting on
Correct.
that. Okay.
Correct.
So just for my clarification, so we've got these 30-some-odd parcels, and this is included with it. So upon submission of the quick deeds,
Quitclaim.
the quick claim deeds, right? The quick claims, the Fernwood Park would be a part of that? Is that what I'm hearing?
Well, it may just be half of it. It's really how the county has identified it. But that's not the county management. This is the department that Harry Carrera is involved in, and all of, through stormwater utility, and what parcels they have been maintaining.
What did they list the other half of the park as?
Let me add, I think I can clarify some of these, because I think we've got some misinformation going on. I believe the park is sectioned in two, because MARTA owns one portion of it. The second portion is the county-owned portion, which they contend is either Fernwood Park or Stormwater. We've heard both.
Right.
Their position now is that it's Stormwater. What I'm hearing Marie say is that the next item on our agenda is for strictly the FEMA purchase properties that we're going to be conveying with Stormwater. She's going to, at a future date, sometime soon, convey the remaining properties that are under the Stormwater coming up, and that Fernwood would be part of that future
And
conveyance.
that's occurring right
Included.
now, just to
Right.
qualify the list that they sent that I've shared with the city attorney's office, asking, is this all of it?
Right.
So
right.
that's what we're
So I'm good with
going
that.
through.
There's a lot, the issues that I was referring to, and I agree with what everything Maria said, relates to those easements or lack of easements where there is stormwater discharge going through private properties, such as the detention ponds that she was talking about, the county didn't own, has no right to own. And really, we would prefer the county to have the responsibility, if they're going to maintain it, and not convey those to us. That's, that's the issue, because we're dealing with that on that one case with the stormwater,
Right.
where we're now finding, one, it's a county issue, so they're going to stop suing us and they're going to go sue the county. And then again, the homeowner may have put the whole thing in himself, don't know. So that's,
Okay. Well,
Are you talking about the case in Oak Forest? Are you referring to the, you can't hear me, okay. I can't hear you either.
Yeah.
Okay, I'll ask you.
I believe the answer is yes.
Yes.
Rebecca, that's
thank you.
that's the one. The third issue on this parks update was the Brookhaven Park. And I understand we're waiting for that 30 days to expire.
Correct.
And my question was, so what is our next step if they, in all likelihood, don't respond in those 30 days? What is the next step on that one?
Well, we can compel them to convey it to us, meaning you'll look for a judicial solution, which will be something we'll discuss.
Yeah. And it may be, I'm hopeful that we find a resolution. I contend that, look, it's always been in DeKalb County Park. It's been used by our, when we were unincorporated, it was used as a DeKalb County park. Nothing's changed, even if it's not transferred, quickly, which I'm not saying I don't want it transferred quickly. I do want it transferred quickly, but I don't want the city to get bogged down in something that takes years to adjudicate and not go ahead and take the position that, look, let's start utilizing that park as a Brookhaven park, just like all of our other.
It's called adverse possession.
Well, you've
We could do
accepted the
that.
maintenance of those parks.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, we have a
What you're
service
precluded from
agreement.
really, what you can do is you can't do any improvements to them.
Well, I've seen, I think recently, the fence, the front fence of Peachtree Road at Brookhaven Park is starting to fall in,
Oh, yeah.
collapse in, and so we have a tremendous amount of park improvement dollars we'd like to spend this year, and I don't want this process with the transfer of the park to gunk up the investments into that park.
The portion that there's no issue about, which we'll maintain as a park,
Back.
is the back portion. And the county basically said, well, you take your back portion, but if you want the front portion, we're going to fight you, and we're not going to give you an easement through the front portion to get to your back portion. And so we had words.
Right.
But, that's just to let you know how, how they may intend to play it. So if we, like you say, we've done this for almost a year.
Right.
It's time to
Fish
go
cut
ahead
bait.
and
Exactly.
let's see where we are.
Seize the park.
Hmm?
Seize the park. Seize it.
Seize it.
Yes.
Yes.
I'd be in favor of putting up a new fence there.
Yeah, I mean, is DeKalb County going to sue us if we start improving that park? You know,
That's another headline I'd like.
No, I don't advise you to do that.
I know that's
Your
good legal
citizens might
counsel,
have
but
an issue with that.
from a practical standpoint, there are plenty of people who would like to see those improvements made in that park. You know, and
I think
Well,
we should do it.
if, assuming we're all reasonable people and it's time to push it, that reasonable people will come to a solution.
I hope so. Okay.
All right, thank you, Tom.
All right.
I had one question for Marie before we moved on. Could somebody put the map up there that's on the FEMA proper parcel map up on the screen? You have it in front of you on the computer, Marie? Oh, there, okay. All right. There's a parcel right there in between two green and 3 green parcels at the kind of the center of the page. Do you see where I'm talking about? It's a completely blue parcel right in the center of the page. There are,
Between Nesbit and Poplar Springs?
I have no idea. It's right here. Yeah,
Yeah, on Poplar Springs.
What, these parcels were bought by FEMA for flood, because they're flooded properties. Why is that one still sitting there? It's completely blue. Why would that one not be one that they would have bought? Or is that something we can start, what's the problem with that one? Do you have any idea? What would the reasoning be?
Talking about the 3 on Nesbit?
Yeah, and that 3, and then there's a blue, and then there's 2.
Yeah, these, I don't know, but I can find out.
That's not really, if you look at the, due to the retention pond.
Right.
With top left there,
Top left.
the light blue is no longer a floodplain.
Well, that's a dark blue.
Where?
On
No.
Poplar Springs?
Yeah.
Light blue.
Right up until Popular Springs, it's like.
That one?
Yeah.
That's light blue. Or are you talking about that one dark blue?
That one, yeah,
Yeah,
the
just
one
that
that's
one.
completely in the middle.
the 100-year flood.
Yeah.
But I mean, if they bought these other ones, why,
Yeah.
what's the reason for that one? That one's not have any white on it.
It might be the very, the low point of all those properties.
Does somebody live, I guess?
Or no, I guess it would be the high.
I
doesn't
don't know.
matter
I'm just
what
wondering
it
why
says.
it's dark blue and it's just completely covered and there's no,
Marie?
Let me check.
Marie?
oh, they didn't sell it? Oh, okay. Oh, they don't have to sell. Oh, these are voluntary.
They didn't take the buyout.
Oh, okay.
And I
Okay.
might, in general, the owner of the property basically has to initiate the process, doesn't have to participate. I don't
Okay.
know if that was what happened here or not.
Okay.
But that would be a very likely reason, possibly.
Okay. It seems like it'd be a nice linear park or a park there if all those parcels were together. But-
Might be in for a shock when he sells.
Yeah. All right. That's all I had for that. We can go to the next thing. Just had a question about it.
All right, before we go to the regular meeting agenda review, this will be real quick for Ben to talk about updating us on Brookhaven 101 and then also the next Builders Summit. Ben?
So the Community Development Department was tasked to create a Brookhaven 101, and the topic related to Brookhaven 101, which has been scheduled for March 16th from 9 to 12 here in the council chambers. The topic is specifically related to tree ordinance, and what we're going to do is run residents, and obviously we will be advertising this event on the city's website through email as well. But we're going to talk about the tree ordinance and walk them through the process. Obviously, a hypothetical situation starting from a rezoning, going to the development phase, reviewing of an existing development that we'll take as a case study, and running them through the review process on our end, what we look for, how we relate that to the tree ordinance, what other factors may come into play that would have impacts to removal of trees that may be required beyond what we have in terms of our recompense requirements, our preservation requirements.
This is on the tree ordinance or on the, is that not the one that Kay's doing, is it? Is that the same one? One of the same, so that's the 101 is the Tree Ordinance 101?
Yes,
Okay.
yes,
Now this is for Brookhaven Tree Ordinance 101.
correct.
That's March 16th.
Right,
Right.
that's just the topic. Brookhaven 101 is going to be a series.
Series
So we're
of
going to be
different
doing
topics.
different subjects, and the first one is the tree ordinance.
Right.
Okay.
So somewhat similar to the builder, and then going on to the Builder and Developer Summit, which we'll be holding those summits on a quarterly basis. The first one being that we schedule for March 23rd. Again, that's a Monday, from 9 to 12, council chambers. We'll be-
Rosemary, you getting those? Okay.
And we'll be also sending out emails to the current list that we already have from our, which I believe was a successful initial Building and Developer Summit that we had in November. In this case, for this upcoming Builder and Developer Summit, we'll be discussing sort of development, looking over development as a whole. We'll be focusing on land disturbance permits and also building permits and running through the builders, contractors, whoever else is interested in participating, through the exact process of the checklist, running through the checklist process, running through the permitting process as well, so that they get a better and more full comprehensive understanding. In addition to that, we also took some cues from the inspectors who perform a lot of the work out in the field and what issues they have run into consistently. So one issue is related to retaining walls, to give better understanding for those in terms of setback separations, height requirements, so to give a better understanding of retaining wall requirements. Also, we're going to touch upon right-of-way encroachment permits and when right-of-way encroachment permits are required. And also, we'll be talking more about the curb replacement issue. So again, we talked about the replacement of existing granite curbs that was not taking place with the change that we took effect with the amendment to the ordinance. I thought that it would be a great opportunity for us to re-educate everyone in terms of the requirements and, again, informing them that we actually do have ordinances in place. Is no longer just a policy that's being implemented.
Will these be filmed and posted on our website?
Yes, even the first Builder and Developer Summit was recorded, and if you look on the meeting agendas page, under Minute Track, you'll find other, and it does have that listing there.
Would you be preparing a syllabus?
We will be preparing an agenda,
Okay, so.
yes,
That'd be good
and we'll
to-
be sharing that. We'll have the agenda created
mhm.
before we send out the notices to everyone.
Okay.
Can we set this up onto the webpage as Brookhaven 101, and then we can have
Yes.
subtitles
We're going to
instead of
have,
other?
yeah, so we were looking into that. We're going to create a banner, and we're also looking into, and we haven't had a chance to talk with Rosemary yet,
Right.
but coming out with distinct web pages for Brookhaven 101, as well as the Builder and Developer Summit.
Ben, what was the date again on the Builder Summit?
The Builder and Developer Summit will be March 23rd,
And was that a 9 to 10 also?
9 to 12.
9 to 12, right, okay.
So I'd
And-
like to see in the future if we can consider having anything with citizen engagement outside of business hours. And I think that was one of the points that I heard brought up at the Builder Summit. Sure, builders, who's their professional business, they want to be there from, 9 to 12, but most regular citizens are not going to be able to take off work from 9 to 12 to come and address these issues, but it's really important, and they, to be able to speak their mind, and sometimes you just don't get the same value as when you watch it online.
Maybe Marie could give the staff the first part of the day off.
Right,
Because I get what you're saying, but
Yeah.
you're going to have
I
some
know,
of the
it's
staff
a-
member to be from 9 to
Yeah, it's,
8. I just think we need to work out
Exactly.
some sort of accommodation.
yeah,
Right, we'll work
some
something
flex
out.
scheduling, we
Yes.
could do that. I mean, this one, I think you've already got, maybe this one's, it's too late to make any changes here, but it would be nice if, I find that 6 to 8 is a real sweet spot where you can get things, hopefully it's not too late.
Right, I think we could take that into consideration. And I think this is my opinion, obviously, and what we're looking to do is with the incorporation of Brookhaven 101, coordinate Brookhaven 101 as to the source for citizens to be educated, where builder and developer is more the technical aspects associated with the actual permitting.
Right.
And to leave that separate for them. And obviously, we'll be recording everything, but sort of making that distinction between the two.
All right,
Yeah.
so yeah, I think you're saying the builder developers 9 to 12 is fine, but
Yes, the Brookhaven 101.
you could make that one later,
Sure. Well-
if you can.
We'll look into it definitely. I think we have some time to make adjustments. 'cause we haven't
I
made
think the
that notice
category
yet.
break on that is residential professional.
Correct.
Right? But I think the professional side of it would also be of interest to a good number of the residents.
Sure.
So to have it readily accessible, I think, is important. and identifiable and where.
Sure.
I just want to pick up one comment here. It's great that we have the Builders and Developers Forum, but the 101 was a byproduct of the issue that originated over a clear-cut development. And the intent on that was to really ascertain why and how that came about. And the 101 idea surfaced under the assumption that an informed resident base is better positioned to offer constructive alternatives to an issue rather than just complaints, okay, which unfortunately in an emotional issue seems to be a lot of what happens. When you understand what happens and why it happens, and according to regulations that we have, then it gives us the power and it gives us the ability and the authority to move forward and understand how we can make changes that can enhance the situation. So I think that's, I applaud you for how quickly you're doing this. And I think that's going to be really valuable.
Yeah, it's a great case study that we have.
Yes.
And it'll give you all different facets of what's involved in terms of the review process, decision-making process specifically related to the tree ordinance.
Well, I mean, like, the biggest issue was in that issue was trying to do everything we can to maintain the canopy. And when you understand what takes place,
Yes.
and then everything that we've talked about for the most part has centered around the stick approach, the penalties and raising fees, et cetera. And the challenge that I gave you all was to say, what can we provide as a carrot, a financial incentive to get the cooperation that we want to help maintain that asset. So, and I'm hoping that you're still challenged with that now.
Oh, yes, we are.
On the carrot part, right?
We are.
Okay, good.
All right.
Can I just add one more thing to that, since we have this conversation at work session? I want to try and bring in another element. We talked about it that day, Ben and Kay and Susan. And Bates and I had a conversation yesterday with a developer, which you were part of, Rebecca, separately. And it's the second most demanded issue on a regional basis by the ARC in Atlanta that has to do with the conservation of water. And the issue that the suggestion I brought up to you, that we look at ways that's incentivizing our developers to install gray water recapturing. They recapture gray water for irrigation purposes on individual lots at the time they build the home. I would like to have Brookhaven take a lead in the city and the state of setting precedent on what we're doing to help maintain the asset of our water base, the preservation of it, reclamation of it. And if we do it at point of inception with building, it's probably going to be the least expensive way to do it. That's the goal, that's the objective. I would be very interested in having you come back with wording on how we do that. It's going to have to be incentivized. That would be very good to do. So what kind of carrots you think we can offer as a city for developers to do that? I would think that would help increase the value of the home for resale, potentially. I think it could tie into our theme of designating developments and/or individual rebuilds as an environmentally friendly built home within the city of Brookhaven. We talked about that as an incentive. Hopefully you'll come up with more ideas on that. And when you have your builders and excuse me, Rebecca, when you have this builders and developers forum, I would challenge you every time to throw out to them feedback on what would incentivize them and the goals of what we're looking for as a city, and how can we best achieve that and work in concert. I think that's a valuable forum for you to have and to really tap their expertise. That's where you're going to get your answers, in my guesstimate.
This is sort of on the same line. Ben, as you develop the 101 course on the tree ordinance, I would really be very interested in hearing your recommendations as to anything that we could do differently when we make decisions, whether it's on zonings or even as the permitting process goes through. Because as I think your case is going to show, at each layer, decisions get made. As you know, we get a zoning case in front of us. Nobody's showing us a tree survey at that point. And just yesterday, as I was meeting with the developer on a proposed house build, one of the things we talked about that I think he's going to do is give us a site survey with he's going to go out and mark the trees. And I'll be interested to see how that informs our debate. There may be some legalities that we need to be aware of. I mean, I don't think we can vote up or down based on, the tree loss, but it at least makes us aware of how many trees we're talking about. And I even talked to him about, if you need to site the house slightly differently in order to save some specimen trees or a grove or something, talk to us about that. I mean, I think we would be open to that discussion. So it's not just, I want you to just go one more step, if that's possible, as you present this lesson. Give us council a lesson to learn too, in terms of how we could make a change or information we could ask for as we're part of this process too.
When we had our first run-through with Ben and Kay and Susan on what's now becoming the Brookhaven 101, one of the suggestions that came out is that we mandate that they have a certified arborist go in and provide the survey of the trees and the canopy, so we understand what that is before it comes, when it comes to us, so we have that map. And then what the consequence would be if you went with single-family homes or if you clustered. Now, when you look at what's going on at East Roxborough, right, if that was a clustered event, it would have a different outcome on the canopy. So, I mean, that needs to be taken into consideration if that's the objective of what we're trying to achieve. At that time, I think the will of the neighborhoods was they didn't want the density of what a cluster building would be. But then they need to know, well, this is the consequence if you don't want to go that route, and understand up front, even with all the other efforts that we're trying to make, or potentially the ideas that will come forth as far as what we can do to incentivize either replants or an extended effort on the part of a builder to really go out of his way to save a valuable tree.
Hey, Kat, I'm sorry, Joe.
No, but that's it. I mean, that's really important.
I had one question for Kay before we wrapped up this. On that Roxborough build, we know that there's some of the trees were dead, or about a third of them were, and then we know that a lot of the cutting had to do with because of the requirements by the county on the water and sewer. What portion of that cutting happened because of that, the water and sewer requirements, those big pipes we see out there?
Yeah, I don't have that specific.
Roughly, if you have any idea.
Gosh, I would say most of the, on the exteriors along, where was it? North Druid, cutting up right, a lot of those are lost due to the stormwater installation.
And so that's what those big
Right,
aluminum
well,
or
that's
steel things.
the basin that those stormwater pipes all feed to, so.
So that was something none of us really foresaw or expected, was that you'd have these, did that developer knew they were going to have to do this stormwater work when they got their permit?
Well, they knew when they got the permit. I don't know when they had it rezoned. I'm assuming that the engineer had to be aware he had to catch the stormwater issues on all those surrounding streets and that whole area so that you avoid flooding downstream neighbors.
Okay.
So that's all part of development.
Right, I understand it. Yeah, was very surprising to me to see those big things and the
Right.
the amount of work that had to
And
be
those are
done.
ground rechargers, I might add. So their detention also has perforation so that we get some water quality coming back in out of that.
Oh.
So.
All right. And there's no problem. How deep will those things go? Do you have any idea?
I don't recall the exact depth, but the large pipes that you see, the underground detention, it's certainly over 10 to 12 feet deep, as I recall. It was a fairly deep installation. We required a geotechnical evaluation to verify that it was above the water table and there was infiltration capability at the depth
Because
of the
they're 10 or
proposed
12 feet
installation.
themselves, and then you
They're more than
have to be buried. So, I mean, is there going to be a problem with planting trees on top where those things are buried? I would think that you're going to get root problems going into those.
Yeah, the pipes would be deep enough to where the roots wouldn't cause a problem, but in general, you wouldn't want to have trees planted directly over the
Most of that
stormwater
is in
detention.
the road too. So
Okay.
portion of that is under the road base.
So they're going to
that
tear
we
the
could
sidewalks
save
coming
that
up and everything?
Center cluster.
Okay,
Yeah.
okay.
Other aspects.
Shift it over.
Right, okay. All right.
Other aspects of the design that might be relevant to this discussion are that we required the developer and their engineer to demonstrate that they weren't increasing rates of runoff onto the surface of the streets. Prior to development, there significant amounts of the area that was developed simply surface drained onto the surrounding streets, and the majority of that is now not draining onto the surface of the streets. That's
So we
being
will get some
intercepted.
improvement in stormwater because of what they're doing.
Yes, and particularly with respect to the amount of water that is draining down across the street surface and down the gutters.
Well, see, that seemed to me, almost looks cost prohibitive, what they're having to do. I just don't see how
They spent a significant amount of money, from my viewpoint, to address some stormwater issues, including improving part of the city infrastructure as you go down Roxborough to where there was a crushed culvert where a creek went under Roxborough, and that was being replaced by the developer as well.
That was a mess. That was a pretty big undertaking.
Yes, and right now, the progress is being held up, just as an anecdotal statement, because they have to deal with DeKalb County with relocating a water line with respect to that installation. And there's been some issues that were uncovered that were unforeseen there.
Yeah, Max, I don't know if I mentioned this to you, but it was really enlightening to see what happens in a development like that, layer by layer by layer by layer, of what has to happen to get it to the point where it is. So if we're going to have this conversation about what can we do to look at doing something with safe trees with the canopies, we need to know this so that we know what has to be altered or what can be altered, and then take into account the cost or the feasibility. So it was pretty enlightening, and I think there's a lot of valuable information.
Is it 10 homes on there?
No, it's 30, it's
26.
26. 26 and 9, right? So a total of about
26 and 7 on the other development.
is it?
Right,
Okay,
26
so
for,
34.
and then there's a separate builder,
They already have
That's
2
it.
homes up, but where the 7 are
Correct.
going, that's on
Wright Avenue.
Wright Avenue.
Yeah, and on top of that, they also have a huge amount of planted back trees that are going in. 78 4-inch calipers, 16 to 18 feet high. And we spec'd out native trees, 82 3-inch caliper, 12 to 14-inch high. And then that should get them back up to 558 inches for the overall in
Yeah.
just plantings.
That's really great, but that really doesn't address what the concerns are when you're looking at 18,
Right.
30-inch trees. I mean, if there's an opportunity to do something for that, we really need to look at all avenues.
All right. Next thing is,
Okay, we're going to the regular agenda.
right.
Okay, the first 4 items under the consent agenda, the first 3 are meeting minutes. The 4th one is the reappointment of both judges. And then the 5th one is a resolution that we've been asked to sign off on by GDOT, which
A
includes
resolution.
the trails and for the 285, 400
Okay.
improvements.
All right.
Going on to reports and presentations, the chief is going to be issuing commendations for some of his staff officers, and then we'll get into the DUI stats that he'll be updating you on.
Chief, are these 6 commendations for one incident, or are they all separate incidents?
It's 3 separate incidents.
3 separate incidents? And I'll ask you later on something else. Go ahead.
Item number 3, Kay has been working on our designation for Tree City USA, and we are there. And number 4 is related to that for a proclamation for the celebration of Arbor Day. And then our 5th item, if you'll be flexible, if we get near the 8 o'clock hour, we'll be ready to present just an overview of our 2013 audit and the findings and some of the changes that we have made. Both the audit team and Rob Logan will be here at 8 o'clock, so we could be flexible there. If we reach this item and it's not 8 o'clock, we need to move on. Under new business, this is the resolution and discussion for the creation of the Convention and Visitors Bureau. Next item, resolution.
I want to discuss that a little bit if we
Yes.
could.
Right.
This is consideration approval. I'd like more time to discuss this CVB and how it's governed and how it's set up. I know we've talked about it. There's 2 different ways to do it, and I know Tom had given us 2 different options. Explain what exactly, Tom or Marie, what we will be looking at tonight what authority will the CVB have? To whom do they report? And how is it set up?
Your charter has created them.
Right.
But this is, Tom will go over the details of their structure.
Okay,
And we could add it to a work session item.
Yes.
To spend more time with it.
okay.
What I envisioned was that we would have no tax increase this year, but put ourselves in a position where, should council wish to do so, then you'd have the organization in place, plus have the 501c6
Right.
recognition letter from the IRS. So I prepared articles of incorporation, and you can see from the articles of incorporation, the council appoints each of the members to the corporation. It's a nonprofit board. There are no members. It's really an extension of the city, but we have to make it look like a for-profit entity for purposes of being able to treat it as a marketing development organization. So when we're able to take part of the tax proceeds of the additional tax, we can manage those through this nonprofit versus having to give it to another nonprofit that we otherwise would not have that control over. What I intended to do was to allow each of the districts to have a pick, the mayor have a pick, and then that the city manager would always be a director as far as the directors that are there. The city manager would also be the executive director, which would be basically the chief operating officer of the business that was there. The various, and the bylaws would be adopted in connection with this incorporation, and that no amendments to either the charter or the bylaws could take place without approval of the board of directors or the city council. In other words, the board of directors would not have the ability to change anything relating to this entity. The other, in furtherance of what takes place as to how this works, is that the tax proceeds comes to the city. All right, you continue to manage the first 5% like you always have. If you want to take the 3% and put it into the nonprofit and direct as to how you're going to do it, you can do that to help
That's my
fund
question
that.
first. You said the 5% that we receive, right, I'm not talking about.
Okay.
You said to manage that. What did you mean by manage? Who manages that?
Right now, the city manages it.
If, under this, who would manage it once we created it?
Well, the executive director, who's the city manager, would then continue to have the direction of the funds. But let me continue. Is that there would be a contractual relationship between the city and the entity, which in turn, through that contractual relationship, the city, i.e. the council, would be directing how that money's going to be used. I.e., so if you wanted to use, half of it for parks, then you would have that directive.
But we wouldn't be saying how it was spent.
Beg your pardon?
We wouldn't be saying how it was spent on the parks. We'd be saying it has to be used for parks.
That's true.
Okay.
But even in today's environment, you're really limited to what's taking place as far as items for tourism and not being able to expand beyond
No,
these additional types of things.
We know the rules about
So
what it's about, allowed to be spent on.
what I'm saying is that the control element is through the contractual relationship as far as how the money is being expended. In other words, where it's going to be designated for. If you're, wanting to improve Peachtree Creek, that's fine. Or if you decide that you want to make some improvement to a ball field and specify that funds are to do that, fine. But that's how you control it. You don't control how it's actually done or actually let out, but you're controlling the use of it.
My concern is, Marie, you've got enough to do, and that just throwing another title on you to do this, to me, that frightens me. I don't know what to, so explain if it's just a name, if it's
I
just a
think I used
figurehead
the word,
thing.
the city manager or or the city manager's designee. That if you have a tourism director.
Right.
Somebody who is responsible for that, then that person could very well be that executive director, subject to the control of the board of directors. But Marie would appoint that, or council could appoint that if they wish.
Okay, so as it stands now, and correct me if I'm wrong, but the first 5% that comes in, goes into the general fund,
60%.
60% of it. So the other 40% would have to go,
It's just for tourism.
which would now go to this entity.
Right.
Correct.
Or could not. I mean, you could keep it. You wouldn't have to send it to the
Okay, but it's any amount above the 5%, should it go into a force, whether it be 1, 2, or 3%?
Actually, only have to be above the 5% is
Yeah.
really what you're trying to protect, that you can keep. Otherwise, you've got to give it to another marketing organization, another 501c6.
So this CVB that we're talking about here is really only activated if and when we ask to have the legislature raise our hotel motel tax beyond the 5%.
That's right. In other words, if you never raise the tax, you would never use it,
Okay,
okay? Because you would continue to keep the 3% in the city.
so your goal was to just have this
So to have it
available,
available,
Okay.
unless you say,
not going to happen.
we don't waste your time or money, then that's fine too. But this is a means by which you can prepare yourself, should you want to be in a position to raise it and be able to designate the money, the additional money over the 5%, as they allow you to designate it, then this is the tool to do it.
Murray, did you have any comment about what I'm saying about, I don't know if this is a figurehead role or what it is,
Well,
the executive director of the CVB?
And I've discussed this with DCA,
Right.
Department of Community Affairs, and described to him what the organization was, and he said they would be very comfortable with that, with the city manager as the director liaison. And it's because of the management of the funds. The funds are collected through the hotel motel tax. They come into the general fund. The general fund then disperses it. And, we have been operating now 2 years in the collection of that.
Right.
DCA has concerns on how we operate that 40%, and that
right.
we should have arm's length
Right.
to that. So we do need to, whether you move forward with a increase from the 5% to 8%
Or not, we gotta
or
do
not,
something.
we need to do something in some form to have what's called a DMO, a direct, marketing organization that directs and creates events for tourism that is related back to putting heads in beds.
Right.
So we're going to have some kind of arm's length. So what Tom is describing is what's being done in practice already. I'm already managing the funds.
Right.
I'm already managing the tourism specialists that we have
Huh.
to ensure that what he's doing is directly related to getting people to come to our hotels via an event that's going on in the city.
Two quick questions. One, you've got Tom to set up as a 6-member board. Is that, I usually hear odd numbers for board. 6 is fine. And, the other question is.
Well, you could,
Is that 6 with a director, so 7, is that what that is?
Who would, I guess there needs to be some, I don't know that I saw
Tiebreaker.
what happens if there's a tie on the board, but you could add something
I would think
to
the
that.
director would be 7, would it not?
Yeah.
no,
I
you have a
think,
5-member board with one director.
Oh,
In other words, it's each district gets one. So if it's for, you may add districts.
plus mayor,
Your
plus.
director is
Plus
non-voting.
2.
Yeah, so you have a
non-voting,
lot,
so it's 5 voting members.
The mayor has a pick, each district member has a pick.
And,
So the executive
That-
director would be 6.
okay, so as a non-voting,
On the other
there's a
side would be
tiebreaker or
is
something?
is to have the chairman not a voting member unless there's a tie.
Well, that's one for your legal.
Yeah.
Oh,
But that's,
you
and the
fix that
chairman
one.
in this case is actually he does have oversight.
So,
And in the bylaws that were prepared, he was actually deemed to be the chief executive. Otherwise, but he has no operational powers. All the operational powers are vested in the executive director.
right. So on that, when you talk about arm's length requirements, does this organization, if the mayor and council appoint the board members and appoint it ourselves, would that qualify as an arm length?
Well, I wouldn't appoint yourselves to it.
Yeah, so we need to designate people that are truly arm's length relationships.
Where your charter works today is that, I think other than the independent auditor, the mayor makes appointments, subject to confirmation of council.
Right.
Makes all the appointments.
Right.
We could do it that way. It just, This seems to be an area that people have an interest in that,
Yeah.
each district may want
Yeah, no,
to,
I think it'd
have
be
that
great.
choice. I mean, it's
Okay.
whatever.
2 points of clarification. So out of the first 5%, 40% would go into this fund? And then half of the 3% above 5 would go into this fund?
Well,
Is that what I heard?
let me go back and tell you, as far as what the law requires, is that the 3%, you can continue to maintain under whatever policies that you have. I would suggest that if you're going to go above 5, I'd go ahead and put 3 in there also, just so you can manage it uniformly. If not.
We're at 5%
Really, your
now,
only
though.
requirement is if you go up the other 3%, only half of it has to be placed with a designated marketing organization. So, and you don't have one.
Right.
Or these other cities around you may not have one either, may not have their own 501c6, and they may want to come to you to,
Like Chatcom did.
help manage the money, and of
There are
course, you get paid
consortiums
something for it.
That do collective direct marketing, where they have joint festivals and events.
Right.
They've found that to be true. I just want to be sure with the percentages, Joe, that you were using. We collect 5 pennies now on the dollar. 3 of them can be earmarked for the general fund. Pennies have to go into tourism events.
Tourism purposes,
creations.
right.
So that's how that works.
And then
So
if we go if y'all decide to go another 3%, then it's 1.5% of that can go in the general fund, and the other 1.5 has to go into the tourism organization.
Right.
So
But
that
that ability going from 5 to 8, that additional revenue can be used for a number of things. Purchasing property, flexing those funds.
Right, okay.
Creating a convention and visitors center and the operation of it can go specifically to that use. Sports complexes, those are generally, they're big ticket items that you would use that additional 3 pennies and half of that to flex.
As far as the North Peachtree Creek project.
Yeah, or it
That
could
would,
be
that could be a funding source for that.
or a conference center, meeting space with a recreation venue that goes with that. Something
Okay.
that was called out for in the Beaufort Highway Plan.
Thank you, Tom.
Would you suggest we revisit it
Yes,
at the next session as
suggest.
another work session item?
yes.
While you all digest it to
Right.
think what, you'd like to see
That's what I
differently?
suggest. What do y'all think?
Is it our intent to consider this legislative session if we are interested in doing that extra 3%?
No, we can't.
We can't, okay, okay, that's
We're
fine.
not-
Just
we
wanted to
can't.
clarify that.
Once we'll have the discussion next time to explain to you what you have to do to get prepared for that, you'll understand we cannot do it this legislative session anyway.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Just a moment. Before we move on, I want to be sure we're setting a date. I want to put this on, with your permission, the March 10th,
Okay,
okay? Because I would like to give you examples
Okay.
of other CVBs.
that'd be good.
And what they're doing.
This is for the work session, right?
Yes.
Yes.
Will you be providing us with information on this prior to the work session?
Yes, I will.
Excellent, thank you.
All right. Transportation Funding Act resolution? Consideration approval resolution?
Yes, okay. You have a resolution in your folder.
Mhm.
Laura, did you want to go over this? This, in your notebook, I'll give you some background while Tom is walking up. I'm sure you all have heard through the legislature and through the governor that looking for sources of funds to implement large-scale transportation improvements throughout the state. And looking at the motor fuel tax and being able to capture that for state funding as opposed to spreading that through and the Department of Revenue is the state agency that collects all sales tax and then disperses it, and they have their own formula in doing that. But one of the concerns that came out from a GMA alert and other cities in the state who are now adopting resolutions to discourage this, is that, it will eat into funds that each city receives as it's being dispersed through the counties, whether that's through SPLOST funds, LOST, or even, in our case, host funds. And I did have Carl check today as to what our percentage of host funds that the county receives that are dispersed to us, what percentage is representative of motor fuel tax. And that's 8%, right, 8%.
8% of what?
8% of the monies that come out of host is made up of fuel tax.
So about $450,000 or so of what we.
And that equates in what, in how?
8, yeah,
Annual dollars would be,
450 grand is the aggregate, and they're saying that would go away, or is in this?
If they stop charging the host sales tax on motor fuel, our direct loss would be about $450,000.
480, exactly.
is
Is there
this,
any offset?
That's depending on what the legislation does. They're talking about an alternative funding strategy.
Yeah.
And based on what we've seen so far with the two strategies that's been presented, we lose money.
Right.
It's written for the counties and for the counties to meet their transportation needs and the state to meet their transportation needs.
But the county has, they get that same, or they get a portion of the host here.
But
the host.
based on the pending legislation, it allows the county to impose an excise tax up to 6%. And
Oh, so
they
they
can
just-
receive a substantial increase. And so now if you base that, our funding after what the county does, we'd be operating at the discretion of the county as to what funding we would receive. And of course, any strings that would be attached to that funding. If they're designated just specifically for capital improvements or specific capital improvements, it limits what the city can do.
Is there anything in the GMA resolution that actually would provide an alternative recommendation? Because I hate just to say no on this resolution,
It says
because
strongly oppose House Bill
Yes,
170.
it proposes that the state of Georgia not do this.
yeah, well, we do need transportation infrastructure funding, so I'm in support of a transportation bill, but not at the expense of our
Well,
I
paving
want to know
budgets.
what our legislators and our governor thinks about this and where we are on the, it's just, this is a resolution that says we strongly oppose the House bill. I mean, it sounds like it's evolving. I don't know if we could do our own resolution saying specifically what the things that you addressed. We wouldn't like to have the county control, have the 6%, be able to do a 6% excise tax and then tell us how we spend it. I think more specifically, we could address it that way. But to come out as a city at the insistence of GMA and tell our legislators and our governor that we strongly oppose the House Bill 170 when we don't really know how it's going to end up, and without having them explain why they might think it's a good idea, or, I'm in general opposed to what I think it does, but I don't know that it's, what.
The resolution did not have the numbers.
Right.
Okay, we can change the resolution to put the numbers in it.
I'm saying I don't know if I
We didn't
want, tonight,
have those.
if I want to do say strongly oppose the bill without knowing a lot more about it, and I don't know what anybody else thinks.
Yeah, that's my position on also. I mean, I am in favor of the general concept of House Bill 170, but it needs to be tweaked so that we get fairness to this
Sort of have
issue
a
on
double
the cities and
whammy.
counties.
What percentage of the host actually goes to sales, goes to property tax credits to the taxpayers?
Oh, the
80?
I think it's
percentage
20.
of our reduction?
20% of the overall host collection. Taxes that's charged to
So they.
We finally got a host expert in the house. That sounds good.
Well, that credit's, that part of the credit's going to be gone.
Right.
Which affects the property taxpayer, which affects, remember, gentlemen and lady, you have a cap on what you can do with your taxes. So there's got to be a way to replace it, and my view that says, well, let the city and the counties do it and everybody take their choice. Well, they went away from that
Yeah.
to now to let the county do it. And if in the near future, all of DeKalb County's incorporated, then you've got the county sort of holding the
Yeah, they're holding the bag.
holding the bag.
I think this, to me, it seems that there is an equitable solution in this. If these parties sit down, I'm optimistic that they'll do that.
A lot of what
Because
the
it's so
GMA
important.
did was to pull it away from the cities because I don't think the cities wanted to have their taxpayers saying, oh my gosh, they're raising taxes on it.
Right,
Not in the form of property taxes, now they're doing it in excise taxes.
right.
Now, the reality of it is you're going to have lost revenue and you got to figure out a way to replace it.
Yeah,
Well, lost revenue.
don't know if
and
the county's
also
Do this.
looking at the history of the city and our two budgets, 2013 and 2014, where you lowered the millage rate.
Right.
Will restrict you from, at least you'll have to give it careful thought if you want to do that, because we're already getting lower.
right. Well, in our
Less funds.
specific situation, we've got to figure out where to come up with an extra $450,000 that we use for paving
Right, or parks.
or for parks, right?
But this, maybe I don't fully understand this, but this GMA alert that's also in our packet says that there's a substitute version. I mean, this is a moving target right now.
It's a work in progress.
So I too am in favor in the broad view of this transportation bill. We have got to. We've got to do it. I'm not surprised that they've, I actually think it's a pretty clever mechanism where they're substituting the sales tax, the excise tax for the sales tax, which is which is a better mechanism to do that. Yeah, it is going to be on the backs of cities and counties, but I think that this alert suggests that they're aware of that, and they're trying to come up with some other solutions. I'd be reluctant to throw out a big, we're opposed to it until we give them time to stew on it a little bit more. I think we all know how to contact our legislators specifically. We could have our input and influence that way and stay abreast of what's happening. Let them know that we're aware that under this existing formula, we let them know that we would take this kind of a hit. But I'm a little reluctant to pass a resolution saying we flat out oppose it. Because
Yeah.
really, one of our biggest issues in Brookhaven is traffic congestion, and we just can't kick the can anymore.
Think of the poor people that one area in Georgia that passed the 1% sale at the T-Splosh. And you should read their resolutions. They are not happy.
Right, right.
But theirs doesn't go away. I mean, any E-Splost or T-Splost is.
No, they still
will
got to pay
run
the
its-
extra and do this. is
And
what-
this.
That's what they're mad about.
Yeah.
Yeah, but they're getting lots of improvements long before we are,
True.
so good
And we
for
need
them.
the improvements.
It may be that the GMA is soliciting the cities to get some resolutions about this equity to use to leverage their argument in the fine tuning of this House bill. If that were the case, then I'd say, the only resolution that I think we would be, that it sounds like we'd be in support of is just pulling out the portion of this bill that deals with the equitable, costs of the cities versus the counties, and a recognition of the fact that our sales tax money for this has got to be made up somewhere. And we can't go back to asking the county for that.
If you had it where you could say, have a county be able to do it, but have cities that could also do it for an amount, but a percentage of that actually had to go to making improvements, not just maintenance. I mean, don't we budget real improvements that we pay for, like the Johnson Ferry, Ashford, Dunwoody Road type things?
Well, in the case of Johns Ferry, Ashford, Dunwoody Road, that was basically funded by PCID.
Yeah, but we've got we use a portion of our host money for pavings and parks and all that, and I think that's what you're talking about, is that, we've cleared very
If you take it away
clearly.
from there, because you lose it.
Right.
And that means you're not going to be able to do those things that you otherwise said
Yeah.
you could do.
I
got a suggestion. I don't know. I don't want to do this tonight, but what if there was a mechanism whereby Would this be legal if the money that you are losing, the $480,000 that we'd be sending to the state now, I guess the state would be getting it, if that exact amount was reallocated back to the city, earmarked for transportation improvements only? Because, I mean, to me, that would be, because there are some places, what I suspect is there are some places who take their host or whatever their proceeds are, and they're not spending enough on transportation improvements. They're not doing, and I don't think we're going to have that problem at Brookhaven.
Right.
So maybe there could be an amendment or.
Restricted
That's a good
funds.
thought.
That would,
Yeah, I think that our position should be to go back to GMA and say, look, we can't, we believe that transportation funding is important for the House to address this legislative session, but, GMA needs to come up with extract the key points of opposition, and we'll pass a resolution on that. That's something that I think most of the cities,
If
are
there's a
dealing with.
solution that's acceptable to you, i.e.,
Right.
take that money and
Right, restrict it.
put it in a basket, and we'll make the improvements to our own city, then it would probably be a good thing
concert
to
with
send to your
GDOT.
local delegation. Just send them a letter and saying, this is what we understand the issue you're in, and you got to do this, but
Yeah.
we'd like to be able to take what you're taking away from us and put it in our own improvements.
Yeah, it sounds like something we need to go back and communicate to GMA that we're
GMA,
just
or
not
go back,
comfortable.
or just write a letter to your local delegation.
I think we should both.
Yeah.
I think instead of submitting a resolution of opposition, we should submit a resolution of support if the following conditions exist. And then we
Right.
state what we are in support of.
Yeah, that's more in line with the intent.
As always, Brookhaven will be on the forefront.
Yeah, let's do that. Let's put that in there. Let's put the
We'll come
language
back
about.
at the next meeting then with that.
We have, do we have, I guess we have time to do that. Now, according to this alert, there was supposed to have been a follow-up meeting on this on the 9th at 2 o'clock.
I haven't heard about
I
it.
have, okay.
I haven't heard any update.
Could redraft this and send something.
I like your suggestion, J-Max.
Address this, yeah. This is- Make a headline.
Okay.
Maybe the GMA, they've got all these things lined up and then. Oh, now, is there any way GMA is going to punish us for not towing the line? What can they do?
I still can't hear you.
I never.
It's good. I'm glad you didn't hear that.
I've got selective hearing tonight, and I can do it when I want to.
Thank you.
Selective hearing.
Yeah.
The,
All right.
Go ahead, Marie.
okay, the next item is the consideration to amend Article 2, Chapter 14, which is the tree ordinance. Oh, Emily has it.
This is what we discussed during our work session last time. It's only two very minor changes. One increases it 1.5% instead of the 1%. That was the first change requested. And then the second change that was requested was to remove the cap on the fees. We did raise the cap to 100 grand, but we'd recommend at least having a cap. Otherwise, I think the city attorney had some concerns that it would be punitive if you just had it wide open.
I thought we discussed 125, wasn't it?
It should be 1.5.
No, 125 for the cap.
Well, if you would like it to be 125, then
I think we came up with that just because 100 inches is what we require builders to plant back, and at the recompense of 125 per inch, that would be 125,000.
That was my understanding.
if that's your pleasure, then
Yeah.
just make sure
That's
you
my
amend it. We know I haven't been great with math tonight, so.
That's right, so you can sit down. No, I actually had a question for Kay about her thoughts on if we raise the plant back to the 1.5. We had reduced that from, originally the DeKalb ordinance was 1.5, and then we changed it to 1. Remind me why we did that and what was the consequence
The
for
thought that
that?
Teresa and I had on that was that you're dealing with smaller lots primarily, so they can only hold a certain amount of trees. That was the thought process behind that, and then having them, pay recompense or find an additional lot to plant additional trees on. But in increasing it back to 1.5, it will just mean additional trees will have to be found a place for, or additional monies would go into that tree fund.
can you recall any sites that you've looked at just over the last couple of months that we've been, changing and amending our tree ordinance where you could see where this would have helped or would have made a difference, or?
I don't think that .5 is going to make that big of a difference if it's something they feel they need to remove, and it's in that buildable area, they're still going to remove it, and they'll just add that recompense, whether it be giving additional trees and planted somewhere or, paying it into the tree fund, either way.
You don't think it's, has a terribly negative impact or a?
No, I mean,
Okay.
most of the
All right.
builders that were in this area were used to that 1.5 anyway.
Okay, good.
so.
And as far as I know, we've just had the one builder that's paid into the tree fund?
Oh, no, we've had several,
Oh, we have. Has anybody hit the limit?
not that I'm aware of.
Okay.
Tom, do you have a level that you consider to be punitive?
At our last meeting, when we were bantering this issue, I thought $100,000 would be plenty as far as a max. If you wanted to take it higher, then double it from the 6,250 and just double it.
Well, that's basically what's being done here, right?
Yeah. So, because if it gets to the point where it's punitive, then it's not going to be enforceable, and also affects the value of land. Well, what we've seen is that nobody's gotten, how close have they gotten to the 62.5? It would take a very large tract of land, very densely populated with specimen trees to probably get there. And I know of no such tract, other than a 30-acre tract sitting on Claremont Road that the county owns. Maybe that would be, somebody could go survey that and figure out what it would be, but I don't see a need to increase the cap, and maybe the other side of it is to have no cap if the 62.5 is not ever going to be attained. I think those are options. In other words, I've weakened my view a little bit on this just based upon the fact from what I'm seeing taking place in the city as far as taking down specimen trees and not having made the cap, not only on North Druid Hills Road, but also on Peachtree Road, where they're building the townhouses. So it's.
Yeah, that was always my real, the consideration that I wanted to see some data on this is that, it's hard to take this ordinance and put it into actual practice and see, how big a development do you have to get, or what percentage of clear cutting on a large development do you need to hit that cap? And I always used where we sit today, or right behind us, is Town Brookhaven. Would Town Brookhaven, as large a development as it is, would it have even hit that cap?
I don't know.
It's hard to know. But
As far as Oglethorpe goes, was it computed?
Well,
I
the
think-
problem is you didn't have specimen trees in that area that they took down.
Oh, those dastardly pine trees.
yes, well, we have some pines as specimens, don't we? No pines?
Only in your yard.
No respect for pines.
Only in
But we have
Brookhaven
plenty
are
of
there no
respect for pines,
specimen
but
pine trees.
They're not considered specimen.
Right.
So,
Well,
but you can see the effect of what it looks
No.
like when you clear cut.
Yeah.
And just take those three instances, that the one we've been talking about, Peachtree Road and,
Yeah.
Oglethorpe.
And as far as recompense goes, for the specimen tree, a crepe myrtle wouldn't qualify for,
Not unless it was a 2, 3, or 4-inch caliper. Then yes, it would qualify.
oh, it would, crepe myrtles.
Some of them.
Huh.
Not all of
get
them.
that
I mean, it
big.
has to be a mixed species. It can't be all of one species. And you have that mixture of inch sizes for recompense. But any of the trees in the category tree,
Right.
preferably off our approved list, would qualify.
And when you say qualify, you're talking about fulfilling the recompense requirement? Okay.
Yeah.
And then I might add that a major contributing factor to whether or not a development would reach the cap or become punitive potentially would be how many specimen trees is a developer proposing to remove?
Right.
If there is a high number of specimen trees that are proposed to be removed, then they're going to rapidly approach that cap.
Right.
If the development doesn't involve removal of specimen trees, then it's going to be less likely they meet that cap. Would you agree with that, Kay?
Yes.
Yeah.
In the case of the site that generated the Brookhaven 101 discussion, I might offer that I infer that some of the concern, not everybody's concern, and it wouldn't apply in all cases, some of the concern is not so much with the trees, that the amount of trees removed, but which trees were removed. Some of the more desirable and impressive trees were removed, and the trees that were saved were less impressive. And that one's a tough one to codify. How do you preserve trees that are judged to be desirable to save, regardless of their size?
Yeah.
Well, how about,
I had a builder just yesterday tell me that, there's a lot of times that there's trees that I want to save that you all tell them, no, those have got to come down for something. So I assume that's probably like where stormwater or sidewalks or something has to come?
It could be a variety of reasons. If there are various standards and requirements that apply to developments that a developer may respond to those requirements by saying, well, the trees have to go down. And that would be up to how the developer and their designer decides to address requirements. However, it is a desirable result to have structurally hazardous trees or unhealthy trees removed as part of the development so that whoever moves into the development doesn't inherit the expense and the hazard of having those trees remain.
I'm going to just think aloud here. Help me along with this thought process. Suppose we were to look at a policy where if a tree is beyond a certain diameter, the recompense cost per inch increases. Because now you have a more valuable tree rather than just keep, 1.25? Is that what it is?
1.5.
1
to 1.5, yeah.
1.25, right?
1.5.
Bill, $125 per inch.
Okay, so maybe if you get above something that can't be replanted, and we talked about maybe a 14-inch tree being the max, then that 1.5 goes up, because that's a much more valuable asset. And if that's an incentive to try and keep the tree, that's good. If not, well, it's just...
That's something to look at down the line for sure, yeah.
You like that?
Yeah.
I just ask you to remember that the people who talked to us about that, they had like maybe a vacant lot that they at some point were going to build their dream home on.
Yeah, I was just thinking.
And they let the trees grow, and so
Right.
now they've got these big old specimen trees that are going to be prohibitively expensive if we up the ante so much, or the little old lady who's going to sell her house after many years, and then we make her lot a whole lot more desirable because we make it so expensive to take down a couple of trees.
Didn't we address some of this
Less
through
desirable.
administrative rights on your part?
Well, we looked at the trees that were in the buildable area of the lot, we would not penalize them for removals excessively on specimen, because they have the right to take down trees in the buildable area of the lot. That's every jurisdiction. It's
didn't up that.
outside that buildable area that you could increase if you wanted to do by diameter. Certain specimens would.
Would you come up with something on that one for us?
I can certainly work on it.
Excellent, thank you.
And you're relooking at the preserving canopy, certain percentages of canopy too.
Correct,
I know we
especially on newly created or new zoned subdivisions.
Right.
Because right now, our ordinance that I'm aware of, the other ordinances don't say where on the lot you have to save trees, except it must be outside that buildable area. So, if you do a canopy coverage, at least if you're a newly created subdivision, you can say it's got to have at least 10% canopy coverage, which says, hey, you got to save an existing
oak tree,
something to
So this
reach 10% of each of those lots.
So this is a subdivision, is it more than 2 homes, or is it?
Well, I mean, typically subdivision is.
Well, basically, anything that involves a creation of a lot is a subdivision, although there's different standards that apply depending on if you're just doing a lot split or if you're going to a more significant subdivision than a lot split.
That's something that's important to me, because, well, how do we, I would like to distinguish between, kind of define what we would consider a subdivision. I would think 3 or more would be, that's where you're going to get into situations where it's going to be more egregious, if possible, possibly egregious as far as what can be done.
And with respect to the tree ordinance applies regardless. Is that correct,
But she was
Kay?
just saying that, but Kay
Yeah,
was
I
just
mean,
saying.
they would still have to do 100 inches per acre and then plus 10% canopy coverage
For a subdivision,
for a subdivision,
Not for-
newly created.
right.
Does the
not for a
canopy
home.
coverage measure help ensure what Joe was talking about, where you preserve your better trees,
That's the idea behind it, that
Yeah.
you have to preserve existing trees enough to cover canopy,
So
as opposed to.
you would have a better chance of preserving that 100-year-old oak that has a great canopy as opposed to the 10 pine trees or the scraggly other trees.
Right, but I mean, if, in playing devil's advocate,
Yeah.
if you had, where the trees are spaced, if it falls that you don't have an oak tree there to cover the 10%, but you've got a pine tree, that's still going to meet your canopy requirement. So if where the oak is on the lot is going to be where the only place that they can put the detention, lowest point of the lot, then that's going to play an effect as to whether or not they can keep that oak tree.
Sure, but if there's an opportunity to look at doing some repositioning, if you have one of those
Sure.
100-inch and you know that its value is X under this formula,
Right.
you're more incentivized to try and make that change. So,
What I want to be careful of is making sure that we don't force people to keep a bunch of pine trees too, though.
Right.
That does, I hear that from people, that, the danger of them and they're, I love pine trees, but they're just, I want to make sure there's some kind of language that can
Right, I
allow
mean, we
people.
condition it on hardwood, as opposed to
That might be
pine.
better,
10% of hardwood canopy.
right.
okay, just for my edification, to recap, I want to know if this is policy for us now. When we as council will get a zoning application, we talked about having a certified arborist on the part of the builder provide a recap to you that you will validate.
Yeah.
And then we will be presented this at council with zoning. Is this in effect, or is this something we're just talking about or waiting on, or policy? Where are we?
That's procedural, that the department can require that as part of the application process.
Is it done simply by us having this conversation here?
Right, and we're directing, I'm hearing what you're saying,
Mm-hmm.
and I will direct the staff to include that as part of their
Yeah, I mean,
procedures.
Ben, you have a comment?
Yeah, I was going to say, I mean, we're going to start the process, and it was sort of that, based upon our initial discussion, to require that information be provided as part of the overall packet that's submitted in terms of the application and the site plan.
When would you expect that to go into effect?
With, we haven't received the new rezoning yet, and that was a discussion in January, and nothing came in, so, but that is the policy that we're going to implement at this point.
Well, we had a
moving forward.
conversation yesterday with the developer, and they were telling us that they were offering to do this.
Mhm.
Now, I thought that was nice, but it should be something that should be mandatory when we're having these things come to us. And then, Kay, when you get your certified arborist report, based upon the conversation here about having different values, you can help us determine which are the more valuable entities on that lot that we need to make sure we're looking at. So potentially, if we're looking at what are the possibilities for repositioning, et cetera, we'll be able to weight it more appropriately.
I think what you're going to see, obviously, is you're going to see the existing status of the property in relation to the existing canopy, and then you're going to see what they're proposing. And I think that will give you a good basis of understanding of how to proceed with the request that's before you. I don't necessarily know how much involvement we may have in terms of the review aspect, because again, we're not reviewing necessarily based against the tree ordinance in terms of planning and zoning and a rezoning that's coming before you. It's more to do with the land use. That is a factor,
Mhm.
but it's not the key component
I understand.
related to that. But we'll
Right.
present that to you, and we have implemented that. We just, again, haven't had a chance to speak with any developer that has come through the doors to speak with us, but we are going to implement that.
Well, Joe was talking about a zoning that's already in the pipeline, and they have offered to do it voluntarily.
okay.
But it would be great if, we have several big developments in the pipeline right now that have come back and bounced around and are going to come through again, that, where the trees are a big issue. If we could
I think we could touch upon that again.
maybe ask them
you
to
know.
voluntarily.
Right, and then the other thing is, being, one of them is JLB.
Yes.
the Hastings property. I don't know if that's the developer that you're referring to or not, but
I'm thinking about Oak Forest, but.
Oak Forest, okay.
Yeah.
Well,
they're
JLB will
both-
be coming before city council again as well at a later time. That could be something that's sort of requested.
That would be extremely
upon the
helpful.
applicant as well.
Yeah.
I'd highly
Right.
recommend that.
Yeah.
Okay, what I really like about these conversations is that we're bringing this whole issue to the forefront, and it's really getting a lot of focus, and I think that's extremely beneficial for us. I'm very happy about that.
All right. Next, John, did you have anything else?
I'm good.
Okay, just making sure. Got to surprise you sometime, keep you awake. over there. Yes.
Is
Departments.
consideration, right, to amend Article 3 of Chapter 2, Administration of the City of Brookhaven to restate Section 2-21 in its entirety to designate the established departments of the city and to add new Section 224 to provide for the preparation of policies and procedures by the city manager or the designee of the city manager.
This is amending two sections. Section 21 was already existing. We changed the language from may to formally establish the departments, and we also deleted some that you didn't have that was in your ordinance and added the new ones. I don't believe tourism, human resources, purchasing, some of your existing departments weren't on the previous version of the ordinance, and this is also now creating the Public Relations and Communications Department. And then the second is a new section, Section 2-24, and that's just pursuant to your charter, having the requirement that each department, the city manager or her designee, creates policies and procedures that come to be approved by the city council.
Tell me again why we think this is necessary.
Your charter uses the word that the city council shall establish the departments. The ordinance, Section 2-21, just said the city council may establish these departments. So that one is just to formally make sure, it's maybe form over substance, but to just fix that up, the form, to make it sure that you have established the departments, because under your charter, it says, requires that you actually establish them, the city council actually establish them.
Do you know if other new cities have done this?
Most cities probably would in their language. It would depend on what their charter said. The charter would dictate what the specific requirements would be. Other cities that I've represented had very specific ordinances about each department, and because that was required by their charter.
When would the city manager expect to present to council the policies and procedures for these departments? Any time frame?
Well, I'm looking at the end of March, that I'd like to come back with that. I'd also like to interject that three of the departments listed here as establishing are not departments. Fire is not a department. We don't have a fire department. We do have the position of fire marshal, and that fire marshal is housed under building inspections, under community development. Office of Tourism, that is not a standalone department because that would be part of the CVB. Tourism is a function of Convention Visitors Bureau. It's not a standalone department. And purchasing is not a department standalone. It is a function of our finance department.
Okay, but if you're going to take Office of Tourism, put them under CVB, it's not on here.
Right, the CVB.
Well, it's a separate corporation.
Right, sorry.
Yeah, separate arm length.
It wouldn't be a department, it'd be a separate corporation.
Right.
Just use these based on the website, but Marie would have the best knowledge about how the departments.
I didn't hear.
I said we just use these, pick these based on the departments on the website, but
Right.
obviously Marie's got the best knowledge of how the functioning of the departments is.
I understand the core of this resolution or ordinance to be an administrative procedural cleaning up of our ordinance to allow us to actually create these, because by charter, we're responsible for creating the different departments of the government, and we don't have them by ordinance created yet.
Yes,
Is that
and
correct?
it'll also help to ever in the future, I don't imagine there could be, but for anyone to question the authority of the departments to act.
Right. Yeah.
Well, I will say that you have established the departments, and if this is just an administrative recitation of it, I think that's fine. But you've adopted 3 budgets,
Mhm.
and these departments have been included,
Yeah.
less the ones that I've just mentioned, as departments having a budget.
From a technical standpoint, based upon the verbal updates that you just offered, would it be more accurate to have this reflect exactly what you said instead of leaving it
Yes.
like fire, put fire marshal?
Fire department. No,
Right.
fire marshal is a function, as we've established it, as part of our building inspections department, which is under community development.
Well, maybe you add that as a bracket after that department then, instead of listing it like this. I'm just saying, if we're
Community
updating it
development.
as the following departments are established by the council, let's be factual what they are.
Well, I agree.
Yeah.
But we don't have building inspections listed, and they are a function of community development. So therefore, fire presumes that we have an actual fire department. We only have a function of an inspector that's a fire marshal.
I'm just saying, whatever it is,
Yeah,
Ju-
I'll
just
clean
do
it
it,
up.
right.
Thank you.
I actually would counter Joe and say that we should create the departments just for an administrative clarification so that we don't challenge the authority of the city departments or staff. But I think that that's something that may change from time to time, depending upon the interests of the city manager to however they best see the departments functioning. And so to have a hierarchy of different departments under, I think, might hamstring our administration to be able to create the most efficient structure for our city. So I think that, I kind of like it the way that it is just we're establishing departments. It's up to the city manager to figure out who's under who.
it's yours.
Your
My 2 cents.
existing ordinance has, I think, EMS and fire, and some that you're clearly not going
Not
to have
doing.
in the present future. So,
Yeah. Well, if we're going to do it, I mean, if there's no, I mean, you want to clean it up, or is this something you just want to?
I think we need to clean it up a little bit.
Well, if we're cleaning it up, I personally don't like, I thought we've always called our Department of Communications.
Right.
I
That's
know.
the other thing I was going to mention. I don't see it as
Public
rel-
relations is, to me, not really a function of government. I know where it comes from. I know corporations use PR. I know we interact with the public, but PR to me has a different connotation in terms of communicating to the public. I'd prefer to just leave it communications.
Yeah.
I can edit this before tonight's session if you want, or if you want to do it on the next agenda, just let me know.
Yeah, I mean,
Just edit it. We can pass it.
all right. Amendment to Article 3, Section 221, is that same thing? Yes. Okay. Other business, don't have any? Public comments? I've got Laura or Emily or Tom, I've got a draft amended resolution that if y'all could type, then we could look at it, before the next meeting. Yeah, I would appreciate it.
What was that?
On the tax thing. Let y'all see it.
Good heavens, I'm impressed.
Okay, executive session? Is there a motion
One for litigation.
for litigation or for person? No, this is the.
We're going to do
sorry.
that in the regular meeting, or?
We're back in the work session, executive session for litigation.
Right.
Okay.
I move that we break for executive session to discuss litigation.
Second? Wait a minute.
Yeah, I'll second it, but I have a question.
Any discussion?
Yeah. So on our work session agenda, we have executive session for litigation. On our regular meeting, we've got executive session for personnel.
Right.
Are we going to have an executive session for
Personnel?
For
Yes.
personnel?
My understanding.
During-
Yes,
Okay,
in the regular meeting.
all right.
All right. Okay. Any more discussion? All in favor of the motion for executive session, signify so by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed? All right. For an executive session. Six.
Do you want to do that
Oh, yeah.
change here? where-
Yeah,